You can run on for a long time, run on for a long time, run on for a long time. Sooner or later, they'll cut you down. Sooner or later, they'll cut you down. Don't tell that long-time liar. Don't tell that midnight rider. Tell the rambler and the gambler and the backbiter. Tell him the God's gonna call him down. Tell him the God's gonna call him down. Run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Run on for a long time. Sooner or later, they'll cut you down. Sooner or later, sooner or later, they'll cut you down. Sooner or later, sooner or later, they'll cut you down.
Good evening. This is David Dutton in the Channel One America Command Center in Atlanta. It's just after 9 o'clock Eastern Time on a Saturday evening. We thank you for joining us. We have some major breaking news to tell you about right now. We understand that the president has posted on Truth Social this evening that the United States has carried out airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. Now, it mentions three of them there in that post from Truth Social this evening that were bombed, and they were bombed successfully. He said he's expected to make an address to the nation coming up within the hour at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Channel One America plans to carry that live. In the meantime, let's go now to an ABC News special report on what's happening at this moment.
Is the time for peace. We have correspondents across the region and in Washington taking a look at all the details as they come in, but we know that earlier in the day we were getting flight tracker radar information. Two stealth bombers were on their way from the United States, we thought, to Guam. What we don't know is exactly what happened, if that was some sort of diversion or if there were planes that were moved to different places. We're getting more details on all of that as information comes in tonight. We're going to go back to Louis Martinez, who covers the Pentagon for us. He's been getting some of that information. Louis, I understand you have new info about how all of this played out tonight. What have you learned?
We have just learned from a U.S. official that, yes, B-2 bombers did conduct a strike in Iran, along with several dozen other aircraft. No other details are being provided right now, but at least we've solved one of the mysteries, which is that, yes, those B-2 bombers, not necessarily the ones that were in Guam. I still haven't confirmed that, but we do know now that B-2 bombers did conduct some of the strikes at some of those three locations identified by President Trump in his Truth Social posting, and that several dozen other U.S. military aircraft were also involved in that strike.
And Louis, do we have any sense about what happens next now? We've talked about the verification process, about President Trump says that these attacks were successful, but do we know if there are troops in the region who may join Israeli troops to potentially go check out some of these sites and see what damage was done?
Well, one of the things that is always going to take place is bomb damage assessment. The term that was used at the Pentagon is a BDA. And sometimes it can happen pretty quickly, and because you have drone aircraft, you have other aircraft that have surveillance capability that are monitoring the area that is going to be struck by the lead bombers who are carrying out and dropping the munitions. So in this case, there may have been some aircraft that had eyes on, if you will, that were monitoring that, and that feed is more than likely going to be analyzed to see how successful a strike it was. In some cases, the BDA can take hours. In other cases, it can take days. So it remains to be seen exactly what we're going to see here. But in terms of this particular strike that was carried out by U.S. bombers, knowing that there were several dozen other aircraft, we can kind of imagine what the roles of those aircraft were. Potentially, they were providing security, so in case there was something along the lines of other aircraft in the skies, we know that Iran has a not very capable Air Force. We're not even sure that some of their aircraft have even gotten off the ground over the last week as hostilities have taken place between Israel and Iran. We know that it is a very degraded air defense environment for the Iranians, which means that the Israelis have had air superiority. Remember that mention from President Trump earlier in the week where he said we have air superiority, and of course at the time we raised questions because the United States had not been involved over Iran, but we had seen the Israelis being the only ones carrying out air operations inside of Iran. And the way they were doing that is because over the last year, there were 2 airstrikes carried out inside of Iran, and namely the one in last October severely degraded their strategic air defense systems, which meant that the Israeli aircraft could come in at a distance and fire their standoff weapons. And with those strategic air defense systems gone, they were flying at will over Iran. And I think that situation makes it a little bit easier for American aircraft flying above Iran. Of course, there's always the risk because there will always be air defense systems around some of these facilities, whether they've been taken out or not. There's always a risk when you're flying over an adversarial country's territory. But in this case, we know that there were several dozen other aircraft involved in the strike, along with the B-2 bombers.
Louis Martinez, thank you so much. I want to go back to Steve Ganyard, our ABC News contributor, former State Department official. Steve, I know that you've been reporting on the buildup of American forces in the region. It's really quite unprecedented what we're seeing.
Yeah, it is. It's extraordinary, Whit. We will soon have, when the Ford leaves Norfolk and gets to the region in probably about a week or 10 days, we'll have 3 aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf region. That has not happened since 2003. So there's an unprecedented amount of naval air power and naval power in the region, to include those ships that we've seen offshore of Israel that are participating in the defense of Israel with the missiles that are able to knock down incoming ballistic missiles. On the Air Force side, there have been hundreds of airplanes deployed not only to the region but to Europe. There are tankers backed up all over Europe. In just about every NATO country has lots of U.S. tankers that will provide an option to the president. So clearly the strikes that went on tonight were probably enough. Maybe they'll have to go back and reattack one more time, but it's probably enough to take out all of the nuclear sites that the Israelis hadn't touched yet. But the amount of firepower, the amount of combat capability and capacity that the president has built up in the region is far more than would be needed just to take out the nuclear facilities. So perhaps this is part of the deception and the mind games that he wants the Iranians to know, that if the U.S. decides to go back in, if the Iranians do something to go after U.S. troops in the region, we have to be concerned about sleeper cells in the United States. If there is something that comes back at the U.S., then that's going to be a problem for Iran. And the U.S. certainly has the amount and the capacity of military power that would be used to go back at Iran and to finish the job.
But Steve, the Iranians have said that you could destroy our nuclear facilities, but you can't destroy our knowledge, the information that we've built up over decades on this. What kind of threat is that? I mean, if the facilities are gone, how quickly could they potentially rebuild the material to make a bomb?
Well, with the facilities gone, it's going to take a long time, because the centrifuges are really what would need, as Ian was talking about before, that most of the enrichment is at about the 60%, but it's only about another 5% of effort to get up to 90. So the centrifuges are key. To your point, though, the human knowledge, the intellectual property that they have developed over the years to be able to think about how to develop a nuclear program is key. So what do the Israelis do? In the first few minutes of this opening, a salvo here against Iran, they borrowed from the Hezbollah playbook, and they took out many, if not of the top 10, top 15 nuclear scientists that are working on the nuclear enterprise within Iran. So they took out the people who knew and had the knowledge, and so that, they hope, will be enough to prevent the nuclear program from being recapitalized. One additional point here. So we have to figure out where the enriched fuel is and who can get to that. So that will be part of any post-war deal where it's the IAEA, it's some independent body that's going to want to get in and secure the previously enriched uranium to make sure that the Iranians cannot use
You're watching continuing coverage of a major breaking news event this Saturday evening on Channel 1 America. The United States has conducted airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities in Iran.
I know the region has changed so much in recent years. You mentioned proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Yemen, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. Who could potentially come to Iran's defense as an ally? What does Russia do? What does China do? How should Americans be looking at this?
Yeah, you'll notice that both Russia and China said they...
One footnote, if you're just joining us, the president is expected to address the nation at 10 p.m. Eastern Time.
Iran is totally isolated, and not only are they isolated, but they have no defenses. And not only is the Mossad operating on the ground with impunity, but the Israeli Air Force is flying over the skies of Iran unimpeded. So they have no friends, they have no allies, they have nobody that's going to come to their aid. So this sets up some concern about revenge attacks. If you'll notice, I believe it's been more than 24 hours since a ballistic missile has been launched from Iran towards Israel. That is because the Israelis have been working very hard to knock down all the launchers, to go to the facilities where they store these ballistic missiles. And so we see this decrease. And they're shooting drones, but drones are not as effective. They take a long time to get to Israel. So a very effective 8 or 9 days where the Israelis have taken down that ballistic missile capability. As that goes along, and as the Iranians continue to be pummeled, and while the Israelis piece by piece take apart their military, their IRGC, their internal security apparatus, this is going to eventually get to a point where the regime will be weakened and something will happen. What will happen? We don't know. Is something better going to take the place of the regime, or is it something worse? This is always the risk in war, not knowing what the branches and sequels and outcomes will really be.
And in a country of 90 million people. Steve Ganyard, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I want to go to Aaron Katersky, our chief investigative correspondent. And Aaron, I want to ask you more just about the domestic threats. We know in the U.S. we'd already been operating in a high threat, high alert environment. Some of those threats, domestic homegrown political terrorism that we've seen. But now, how does this change the calculation? How might law enforcement agencies across the country respond to these attacks?
They're already responding with, as we speak, the NYPD in New York is responding to cultural, religious, and diplomatic sites associated with Israel and Iran. This is out of an abundance of caution. They say there is no specific threat, but they want to make sure there's a deterrent presence at these locations. Because the U.S. has to be considered, the U.S. homeland now has to be considered a target of Iran. And although, as you've been discussing with, Iran is highly degraded from Israeli attacks now from the U.S. The U.S. is now a player and is a belligerent actor in the eyes of Iran. So the U.S. homeland has to be considered a target both from proxy groups that Iran can dispatch and has already shown some adeptness in attacking U.S. interests both here and abroad, but also through cyber attacks. And there's law enforcement officials have been told to expect heightened cyber threats from Iran. And remember, the Iranians have already targeted President Trump personally, holding him responsible for the General Soleimani attack, and they've sought revenge ever since.
Always the threat of a lone wolf attack, too, and that's always a major concern for law enforcement, somebody who's maybe not directly getting any guidance from Iran or Iranian proxies.
Coming up next at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, the president will address the nation on the United States attack tonight on 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. Meanwhile, if you're just joining us, this is just in to Channel 1 America. ABC News is now reporting that the New York Police Department has now been called out to some religious sites in New York City out of an abundance of caution. Of course, now the United States a target for possible terrorism as a result of this action that happened this evening from Iran's proxies, terror proxies that Iran has.
Netanyahu and the president have been very close. I was told that at one point they were speaking maybe even multiple times a day, and that a source told me that the president received direct pressure from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the U.S. to get more involved. It was an option that the president at first was keeping an arm's length distance to, and then increasingly he started to warm up to this idea, asking in the Situation Room about these options, about whether or not the United States could successfully carry out this attack. The president tonight saying that ultimately this was successful, but as he's been in close contact with the Israeli Prime Minister, he did speak to him yet again after these strikes.
Rachel Scott for us, thank you. Let's go back to Jon Karl. Jon, I understand you had a conversation with a very good source in all of this, President Trump himself. What is he saying to you tonight?
Yeah, I just got off the phone with him, short conversation. The bottom line from him was, in his words, this was a tremendous success tonight. When I, engaged with him on questions of how this was undertaken and what the next steps are, he did not want to engage on that right now. He obviously is addressing the country in less than an hour, but he did pick up the phone to tout what he called a tremendous success tonight. Separately with a conversation with another good source, not President Trump, who said that there was a lot more to this attack than taking out the nuclear sites in Iran. The big question now, of course, as we have discussed, is what will Iran do to retaliate? It has a vast arsenal of conventional weaponry, of ballistic missiles, mid-short-range ballistic missiles that can hit a whole range of targets throughout the Middle East, as we've seen over the last 10 days with Israel. And it appears that tonight, according to my source, there was a major focus on destroying as much of that as possible as well, not simply the nuclear sites, but also targeting Iran's ability to respond to what happened tonight.
And John, as you know, all presidents come into office with plans for the homeland, their domestic agenda and all the things that they want to do. And Trump himself very vocal about ending foreign wars and not wanting to engage in long, extended conflicts. This, no doubt, I mean, can you even compare this to a decision he made in his first term? Is this the biggest, most consequential decision he's ever made as a president of the United States?
I don't think there's any doubt that on the facts we know right now, this is the most consequential decision Donald Trump has ever made. And we don't know, is this going to be consistent with his promise to end forever wars? His allies are making that case. They're actually saying that although this was a military action, it was a military action that they believe will prove to have done away with a threat that has been a shadow over American policy in the Middle East for nearly a half a century, the threat of the Iranian regime. But let's remember also what Donald Trump said in his inaugural address. Very important words, besides saying he wanted to be known as a peacemaker. He said that he will measure results by the wars that he has ended, and perhaps more importantly, by the wars that he has not, that we do not get into. Now, we don't know. Is this again going to be proved to be effectively ending a low-grade war that the United States has been engaged in for 46 years, since the Iranians, the mullahs took over in 1979? Or is this the beginning of another more dangerous, more violent, more active phase in the U.S.-Iran conflict? But whatever it is, this will be the moment that, at least from the facts that we have right now, Donald Trump will be judged by.
Yeah, major questions tonight and what happens tomorrow. Jon Karl, thank you. Let's go back to Ian Pannell in Tel Aviv. And Ian, we've already seen prior to tonight, some of these attacks, some of the missile attacks on Israel have been getting through. A lower percentage, but we've seen some of the damages on hospitals and residential buildings there. It's been quiet so far tonight, but what are Israelis expecting in the coming days?
Yeah, I think the immediate reaction will be people will be fearing the worst. Interestingly, the Home Front Command has just issued new guidelines to people, basically activating the highest state of preparedness. In other words, nobody should go to work, all businesses will be closed, nobody goes to school, and everybody should stay close to shelters. In other words, everybody is bracing for an Iranian response. We certainly heard all the various lurid threats that we have been issued by the Ayatollah, by the Iranian foreign minister and others over the last few days about what would happen if America joined this war, which it has now done. President Trump and others may be hoping that this is a one-off action and that will draw a line under events. Well, as the military gets to say, the enemy gets a vote in that, and we have to wait and see what the official Iranian response will be. We have heard from the Iranians that at least 2 of those facilities that were struck tonight by U.S. resources had been evacuated beforehand. Yoav Gallant, who of course is a former Israeli defense minister, posted just in the last few minutes, President Trump took a bold decision. The world is now a safer place. But we're also hearing already threats from one of the Iranian proxies. This is the Houthis, again, on X. Hazam al-Assad, who's a member of the political bureau of the Houthi movement, saying Washington must bear the consequences of this strike. Steve Ganyard, who you were speaking to earlier, got it absolutely right in terms of the sense that Iran has no major friends in the region. It has commercial allies, ones that it has supplied weapons to, in particular Russia and China, but none of which are ready to come to Iran's aid. The proxies, all of these proxy groups have been severely downgraded, primarily through Israeli military action over the last few months. Hamas, of course, Hezbollah in particular, the decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership, and, of course, the U.S., together with Israel, was bombing the Houthi rebels who are supplied by Iran. They're based in Yemen. But why are they a threat? They're a threat because of the Straits of Hormuz. This key shipping lane will now be seen as a potential target for Iran and Iranian forces. And it is critical for oil supplies, not so much for the United States, but certainly that reach China and the European Union. Those shipping lanes are absolutely vital. Now, the deal that was struck between the Trump administration and the Houthis, much to Israel's annoyance, it was a direct deal, essentially guaranteed that the Houthis would not attack U.S. facilities, so U.S. Military craft going through the region or U.S. tankers. Now the question is that deal still in place? Will the Houthis regard it as having been breached by the United States? Well, if that statement means anything, and one should expect that there will be a lot of lurid statements, we have to wait and see what the action is. But if it do, then U.S. craft going through that area will be susceptible.
Yeah, it's a very important point, the potential global economic implications and ramifications as a result of this escalation here. Ian, panel, thank you once again. I want to go back to Matt Gutman. Matt, you've covered this region for so many years. What more are you learning tonight about Iran, how they are responding to this from your sources?
I have a source that I just texted with and he reminds me that Israel and the U.S. had some sort of war games about a year ago. Now, they have war games every single year, but this one was different because for the first time, it focused on offensive capabilities against Iran, essentially some sort of preparation for this very kind of attack. Now, the source says they did not plan a year ago for this to be happening right now. They did not know it was going to happen, but it was unique, and it was done under the Biden administration. Some kind of attack, planning for offensive action using a combination of Israeli and U.S. capabilities, including military capabilities, but also intel against Iran and against, they didn't say at the time, but now it's become clear, against its nuclear capabilities, to dismantle those nuclear capabilities. Now, that person says that they are confident that at this point, the damage to the nuclear sites in Iran is irreversible. And I think it's key to remind folks at home that when we talk about destroying these sites, it's not about reducing it to absolute zero. It's about buying a lot of time for the world to wait for a regime change or for something different to happen. And I think that the understanding is, especially among the Israeli military defense echelon at this point, is that what they hoped would be done has been done. And it's also my understanding that Israel has been obviously trying to bomb those nuclear facilities in Natanz and Fordo and Isfahan. And they've been going at it for, as you all mentioned, 9-10 days now. But they only have 2,000-pound bombs. The type of bomb, that mass ordnance penetrator, the MOP, that we're talking about is 30,000 pounds. It is specifically geared to penetrate deep inside mountains, which is where Fordo is, and these nuclear capabilities are. And this is the kind of thing that Israel simply couldn't do alone. It has been trying, basically digging giant holes with regular bombs or more conventional guided bombs, and now they have what they had always hoped for. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, it should be remembered, has been talking about this for the better part of his career. This is dismantling Iran's nuclear ambitions has been something that he's talked about for about 20 years or more. And this is the culmination of everything that he has hoped for. Internally in Israel, they're also talking about how this keeps him in power. It prevents him from being indicted or from being convicted at this point, because it puts Israel essentially in another state of war, and they can't be distracted from that. But there is a significant amount of satisfaction in Israel with the way this has been conducted. The question now is how the Iranians decide to retaliate against forces in the region. That source telling me he predicts that there will be a ceasefire and that Iran will come to the table in 2 weeks or risk losing the regime entirely. He emphasizes that the military leadership in Iran is dead. Israel killed the very top leaders, essentially the chief of staff, the head of intelligence, the head of their air force, the head of their rockets and drones, or missiles and drones, and a lot of the know-how that could be able to recreate any sort of nuclear capacity in the future. A lot of those scientists have also been assassinated in the process. So this person is very satisfied, but the question is, where do they go from here, and what kind of retaliation are we seeing?
Matt Gutman for us. Let's go back to Ian Pannell in Tel Aviv there. And Ian, you're getting some new information. We know this pressure campaign was happening from the Israelis to the White House to get involved. What more are you learning?
Yeah, well, we're certainly learning. This is from two sources here in the country. The political and security cabinet convened here. This was hours before the U.S. strike on Iran in an underground bunker. It's not clear if they are still there, whether they were watching these events unfold live. But it looks like, given the president's comments, and we know from Mary Bruce and others, that Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke to President Trump before these attacks took place, that there seems to have been close coordination. Again, Steve Ganyard mentioned the Israeli resources on the ground. Not just aircraft, but they've got drones over the skies of Iran. We're also hearing from Iranian military officials and local officials in those areas also confirming that there were explosions in those key sites in Natanz, in Isfahan. But they're also saying, certainly Iranian TV is reporting, that the uranium stockpile had been moved out of the area, thereby reducing the risks of radiation.
Panel for us, thank you. And once again, we're getting multiple sources reporting that those B-2 stealth bombers were part of these attacks at 3 separate nuclear sites in Iran. The president, speaking to our John Carl tonight, calling this a tremendous success. Remember, he put a bit of a deadline, 2 weeks, for him to make a decision, but that decision came down tonight, and he says it was decisive. We are waiting to see more reaction from Iran and from Washington and from Israel. The skies above Tel Aviv so far have been quiet, but we are waiting to see how this all plays out. ABC News will have continuing coverage throughout the evening. Here we'll come back. President Trump will be speaking later tonight at 10 p.m. to address the American people.
You got weeds?
Oh, I got weeds.
You got the stuff that lasts up to 5 months?
Yeah, no.
Okay, that's the very latest from ABC News. If you're just joining us, we have learned tonight that there has been an attack on Iran by the United States. We understand just in that B-2 bombers were used in the attack on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities this evening. And we also understand that the president said that those bombers returned away from Iran airspace very safely. They are back away from Iranian airspace. And everything is good with them. We've also learned tonight that the New York City Police Department has deployed extra men and women over to religious facilities, including Jewish facilities in New York City tonight, and out of an abundance of caution, because of course the United States could become a target now from Iranian proxies, terrorists that would have targets either in the region, U.S. Embassies where troops are, or over in the Middle East, or America itself could become a target as a result of the United States entering this war, if you will, at least for tonight, by sending those bombers, B-2 bombers, stealth bombers over there to Iran, return safely, return successfully, after apparently, according to President Trump in a Truth Social post this evening, successfully, he says they're gone, the 3 nuclear facilities, they're gone, according to the president. The president's going to address the nation in less than 30 minutes at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Channel 1 America will be with you all night long, continuing coverage of this still continuing developing story. You're listening and watching the Channel 1 America War Room tonight. Let's go now to NBC News coverage of this major breaking news event. The United States has attacked 3 Iranian nuclear facilities.
Yesterday in New Jersey, whether he would even request Israel to halt its airstrikes as a means of trying to bring Iran back to the negotiating table. He was quite clear that that would be a, quote, hard thing to do because Israel was winning. Just over 24 hours later, the president moving forward with these strikes. Of course, there are a lot of questions, Jose, beyond this. The president suggesting that it is now up to Iran to move forward with any potential nuclear arrangements with the United States and that troops are no longer in Iran airspace. At the same time, Iran had made it clear that they would target in retaliatory airstrikes U.S. military installations, even if the U.S. continued to defend Israeli airspace like it has this last week. This takes it to the next level. I can report that even this afternoon, the U.S. and Iran still had an open line of communication here. The other question moving forward was just how close Iran was to nuclear weapon capabilities, Jose. The Director of National Intelligence had testified up on Capitol Hill this spring that there was no U.S. intelligence that Iran was actively building a nuclear weapon. Now, we know over the last months they had increasingly enriched higher levels of uranium that would ultimately go in to a nuclear weapon. But I asked the president about that intelligence. He dismissed his own intelligence community's assessment and that of his Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, saying they were, quote, wrong. 24 hours later, again, the president deciding to move with these striking hits on Iran. There's a lot of questions of just how much damage has been done to these nuclear facilities here. But for now, we expect to hear from the president in just over 20 minutes from the White House upon his announcement that the U.S. moved forward with these offensive strikes within Iran. Jose.
And Vaughn, as we await those words from the President of the United States, our own Kristen Welker is just wrapping up a conversation with President Trump in which he refers specifically to these missions that we saw and that we've been talking about, calling it, quote, a complete and total success. The question many would have at this hour, Vaughn, is why now? Why tonight?
The question, I think, is a good one, Jose, and that's one that the president will have to answer. Seemingly, in the exchanges that I had with him on that New Jersey tarmac yesterday, the president seemed to question the motives and the intentionality of Iran in these nuclear negotiations, saying that they had 60 days. He had given them a 2-month timeline to come to the table to the U.S. and work in good faith, and that they had missed that 60-day marker. At the same time, the president had given them essentially this extra 2-week window here, and it just seemed like there was an impasse between what Iran demanded, and that was the capacity to enrich uranium. One that we should note, the U.S. under the Obama administration back in 2015 had struck a nuclear agreement with Iran that back in 2018 the Trump administration had pulled out of. And that agreement allowed for international UN inspectors to go into those very Iranian nuclear facilities and inspect the uranium enrichment that Iran was moving forward with. But it also capped the levels of uranium in which they would be able to produce, essentially keeping it under 5%, which would be for civilian nuclear capabilities, for medical and other purposes. And the president, again, just yesterday, when I asked whether he would be open to a similar agreement, one in which they would be able to enrich up to that civilian nuclear capability level, he said that he did not believe that there was any reason for them to enrich at all, which again, Iran had said was a non-starter here. And so it looked like the president, he had made clear, I asked him a question of, again, going back to that questionable intelligence about whether Iran was actively seeking to build a nuclear weapon. I asked him very specifically to compare this to 20 years ago when the president, years into the Iraq War, questioned the U.S. administration of the Bush White House to go into Iraq on questionable intelligence of weapons of mass destruction. And he was very clear to me that he believed that Iran was weeks, if not months, away from having nuclear weapon capabilities. So we will wait to see what he says tonight. But 24 hours before the airstrikes, the last time we heard him speak on camera ahead of the decision to move forward with these offensive measures here, the president made the case, despite his own intelligence community saying otherwise, that he believed that Iran was within weeks or months of a nuclear bomb capabilities. Jose.
And for more, I want to bring in the moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker. Kristen, we were just mentioning that you just literally got off the phone with the president. What did he have to say?
Well, Jose, he is clearly feeling emboldened. He called these strikes a great success, a complete and total success. He then said he had to get off of the phone, he said, because he has to make a speech about it, which of course we are anticipating at the top of the hour. I did try to ask him some of those questions that you were just discussing with Vaughn, but again, it was clear that was the message that he wanted to take out and to get out, and that he was not going to answer questions in this moment. So we will have to wait and see what he has to say at 10 p.m. But again, I do think it's important to stress what Vaughn was just talking about, which is that this decision came after the Trump administration had for some time tried to strike a diplomatic deal with Iran to get rid of its nuclear weapons program. And then President Trump saying he was going to give Iran another 2 weeks before making that final decision. And ultimately, it's clear the administration must have come to the conclusion that that diplomacy was running into wall after wall, was not yielding the results that they were hoping for. And of course, it's also worth noting that President Trump ripped up the Iran nuclear deal that had been struck under former President Obama. Mr. Trump arguing it didn't go far enough. Obama officials arguing that was the very thing that stood in the way of Iran being able to develop a nuclear weapon. So that's some of the context to this. And then just broadly speaking, we're starting to see the debate play out in Congress. Tim Kaine out with a statement saying the American public is overwhelmingly opposed to the U.S. waging war on Iran, and the Israeli foreign minister admitted yesterday that the Israeli bombing had set the Iranian nuclear program back at least 2 to 3 years. I will push for all senators to vote on whether they are for this third, what he calls a, quote, idiotic Middle East war. So that is part of the pushback that you are starting to see on Capitol Hill, and that is part of the debate that I think we will see play out in the coming days and weeks as we watch and wait to see what President Trump has to say when he does address the nation in less than a half an hour from now, Jose.
Kristen Welker, thank you so very much. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, in Tel Aviv tonight. Richard, we've been talking about the reaction here in the United States on Capitol Hill, but how could this strike impact the region, and what has been the reaction in different parts of the Middle East?
This region is already at war, so this is just another phase of an expanding war, a war that Israel has been carrying out very successfully militarily from Israel's point of view since the October 7th attacks. We're hearing from Iranian officials already, this coming from Iranian state media, and they are reporting that the nuclear material was evacuated from these sites that were hit, that whatever was inside, and they didn't specify, had been taken out. That coming from an editor on Iranian state television, on Iranian state media, which is semi-official, speaks for the government, and an advisor to the Speaker of Parliament, both saying the same thing, that those facilities had been evacuated. Here in Israel, we are expected to hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu, who's expected to speak after President Trump gives his remarks. But already there has been a notification put out to the public here, a change of the home front security status, telling people to be more cautious, limiting freedom of movement here. No schools, no gatherings, only essential work gatherings, putting this country more or less in lockdown for the time being.
And Richard, any support that Iran could have expected or desired since October?
New headline, President Trump telling NBC News that the mission that was carried out this evening, 3:45 in the morning, over in Iran, by the way, was a complete and total success. That's a complete and total success of the 3 nuclear facilities in Iran that were bombed by the United States this evening by B-52s.
To the breakout moment that the United States needs to attack. But Israel's long concern by Netanyahu, but also intelligence and the Israeli military, was that if a military action was taken, that Iran could respond, not directly, but could respond through its proxies. And the main one that Israel was concerned about was Hezbollah. Hamas was always a concern, but Hamas's military capacity, its rockets, was known. The major sword hanging over Israel's head was the military capacity of Hezbollah. That's been taken away. It gave Israel the opportunity to do this. But now, as you mentioned, the debate around the world is and must be, just because you can do something, should you do something? And where will this lead? Will this open a door to a corridor that is long and dark? Or can President Trump, as he's likely to frame it, as a one and done? This is the U.S. intervened. The U.S. isn't going to get sucked into another black hole in the Middle East, that this was a one-time offer giving Israel military capacity that it didn't have, and now it is up to Israel to continue the mission. That is potentially an American plan, a possible way for President Trump to try and split the difference, that he intervened, but he's not an interventionist. But as Jose, as you know, and anyone who's covered this region for a long time knows, it is easy to start wars. It is very difficult to end them. And once you start conducting major destabilizing attacks against a foreign government, particularly a dictatorship, there is the risk that you have regime change, and then the entire map of the region starts to adjust. It starts to shift. If you pull one piece out of the puzzle, everything else adjusts around it, as we've seen ourselves.
Yeah, and Richard, you know, there are so many unknowns. There are so many questions. And if we look at history, there have been repercussions, many times unthought of repercussions. And I'm thinking of you know,
President Trump is expected to address the nation shortly, in less than 15 minutes at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Channel 1 Atlanta, or rather Channel 1 America, plans live coverage of this event. Stay with us for continuing coverage of the United States attacking Iran tonight, all night, here on Channel 1 America. Stay with us.
Relationship with Iran in the past, and I'm thinking specifically Saudi Arabia.
Well, the Gulf countries are generally supportive of this, even though they were supportive of the process. There was a long animosity between the Arabian Gulf countries, the Arab world, and Iran, the Persian world, the Sunni Arab world versus the Shia Persian world. That has been a bitter divide, and the Gulf states have so far tonight remained largely silent. The U.S. Military has bases in the Gulf, bases that would have undoubtedly been involved in this operation. So Iran is not going to get any state support from the Middle East. There's no country in the region that is going to risk its national security, risk its survival to intervene on behalf of the Iranians. But Iran still does have a semblance of a network of militia groups. Hezbollah has been removed. That was the primary threat that Israel was always worried about. It does have the Houthis. It does have some militia groups in Iraq. I think that's probably where the biggest concern is right now. It is Iraq, because the government there is quite pro-Iran. Iran has deep infiltration into the Iraqi security services. So Iran is probably the area where they have the most capacity to attack, which is why we've seen so many moves, I think, to reduce personnel and exposure at the U.S. Embassy and other diplomatic facilities in Iraq.
I want to bring in NBC News military analyst Steph Twitty. He is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General. General, it's great seeing you always. These are very difficult times. What are you seeing when you see the President of the United States announcing what he told our Kristen Walker was a complete and total success mission of taking out 3 important nuclear sites in Iran?
Yeah, well, so what this tells me when he says complete success is obviously we strike the 3 nuclear sites. And one of the things that's needed in order to determine whether it's complete success is what we call a battle damage assessment. You can get those assessments by numerous means. Oftentimes you sort of want to have someone on the ground to verify, but obviously this is not the case. So we use space-based assets like our satellites to determine. GEOINT is what we call it as for our intelligence as well. Signal intelligence. We collect all these means to determine whether or not we truly struck the target and we were successful. Now, I'm quite sure, and we don't know yet, maybe we'll hear from the president and he'll tell us more. There could have been a restrike on these targets. We just don't know, given what we've been told at this point in time. But essentially, it starts with that battle damage assessment to determine whether or not we're successful or not. But given all this, here comes the hard part now. We keep talking about 40,000 U.S. service members are in the region, and they're going to be extremely vulnerable. And the Iranians, they'll wait for the long game to strike as well. I take you back, Jose, to the USS Cole when it was struck by a waterborne asset that killed several sailors. And so all the combat power that we have in the region now, we just have to make sure that we have the proper force protection procedures in place and the proper strike procedures, because this thing may elevate to a point that we have to strike additional targets in Iran. So if you ask me this evening, how does this end? I don't know, but we have to be ready in terms of force protection and to escalate if this thing gets out of hand.
And that force protection that is not only must focus on those tens of thousands of in-service Americans throughout the region, but also, and I'm thinking of the Beirut barracks attack on our Marines that was, ordered by Iran. And I'm thinking the many different proxy attacks that have been carried out against U.S. interests in the region since 1979. This is not a new thing, but General, there are so many different ways that Iran could react, not maybe directly.
Yeah. let me also remind you, we keep talking about Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, they all been wounded. That may be the case. But I will tell you, all these proxy groups will have lone wolves out there that will try to strike a U.S. target. That's what they're going to look to strike, a U.S. or Israeli target. And so whether it's the entire group itself or whether it's their lone wolves, we have to be looking out for things of that nature. And our U.S. intelligence and working with our coalition partners will be critical as well. Jordan, Qatar, Kuwait, others in the regions that we share intelligence with, we're going to have to rely on them to assist us as well as we go through the days and months ahead.
General, thank you very much. I want to continue bringing in our conversation, our NBC News Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube. Courtney, there are so many American military assets in the region, but there must be concern tonight as to how protected they are from, for example, what the general was talking about, a lone wolf or a small series of lone wolves.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's primarily these proxy networks and proxy groups that have been supported by Iran for years in the region that are the biggest concern right now. Now, the U.S. has a number of bases. We heard General Twitty say about 40,000 people. Not all of those are forward-based, but a lot of them are. And these bases have defensives, so they have the ability to defend against mortars and rockets and even ballistic missiles. But the concern here is that if there were to be some sort of an attack, that there would be an effort to overwhelm those base defenses to specifically target Americans. Now, the U.S. has taken a number of steps to try to mitigate these concerns in recent weeks. Number one, they just recently said that dependents at these bases can leave. They can, places like Bahrain, you can bring your family with you on your deployment. A lot of those family members did leave, according to officials who we've spoken with. In addition to that, the U.S. has just brought in more defenses. So we know there are ground-based interceptors. They also have ships throughout the CENTCOM area that have the ability to defend against incoming missiles. They're known as ballistic missile defense ships. And the U.S. also has brought in additional fighter aircraft that have the ability to literally shoot down incoming missiles or drones that could be threatening the U.S. or, frankly, threatening Israel as this conflict goes back and forth between the Israelis and the Iranians for now about 10 days, Jose. So the U.S. is taking steps to mitigate these threats, but the reality is officials who I speak with are extremely concerned about these proxy groups, or as you called them, the lone wolves who could try to take out Americans. Jose, what's very clear is the U.S. has now entered this conflict with these strikes, but if there were to be a large attack against a U.S. base, the worry is the U.S. would be even further brought into this, what is now seeming to be a war, Jose.
And that war that has seen Israel involved in, and very much so in this last week. Courtney, as far as the weaponry that was utilized, I know that this is really breaking news and it's developing very quickly, but we were reporting that two, at least, of the planes, the military planes that had left the United States that were heading overseas, that could be the ones that could transport these bunker buster bombs. Do we know any ordnance specifically that was utilized here?
So the B-2s, they're known as the Spirit bombers. They did take off out of Whiteman Air Force Base. That's in Missouri early this morning Eastern time, Jose. That would have given them enough time to be on station about the time we believe these strikes began at Fordo. And why that is the most likely asset or aircraft and weapon that was used here is just what they would have to take out at Fordo. 200 feet roughly of reinforced concrete that you would need to blast through to even get to those hallways inside that nuclear facility to really be able to take out the facility and destroy it, as seems to have been the mission here. So those were likely used. But remember, I talked about these other assets that have been brought in and really bolstered in recent months in the region. Those also included U.S. military ships, Navy ships. They have the ability to conduct strikes. We have seen that happen in recent years. In the region, in fact, the U.S. has fired Tomahawks, known as T-LAMs, into Syria, into Libya. So that is a possibility as well. They can be fired from both surface ships and from submarines. Jose, the U.S. has both of those in the area.
Courtney, stay with us. We have the first words by the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, after the news broke of the United States' involvement, including the destruction of 3 military nuclear sites inside Iranian territory by the United States. Here is the Prime Minister of Israel just a short time ago.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, just a short time ago. I want to go right back to the White House. Our Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander is standing by. Peter, good evening. You have new reporting on what we can expect to hear from the president in just a couple of minutes.
Jose, we should note, as you were just listening to Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu there speaking from Israel. It's still before dawn in that country, but we do know that President Trump and Netanyahu spoke several times over the course of the last several days, including a conversation they had after the U.S. dropped those bunker-busting bombs on Iran overnight. As for our new reporting, I've been speaking to a series of White House officials, and multiple officials here are now describing to us for the first time what we should expect to hear from the president beyond the details of today's intervention by the U.S. in this war between Israel and Iran. These officials tell me the president hopes and will communicate that he hopes tonight's strikes help prompt new diplomacy between the United States and Iran. In effect, hoping that this strike in itself an escalation will force Iran back to the bargaining table to, in the words of these individuals, these officials I was speaking to bring an end to this war. I've also had an opportunity to exchange messages with the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who was in the Situation Room with the president as he was monitoring these strikes taking place in Iran. She tells me, and this is a quote, "Great day for our world's safety." Of course, the real question is what the days ahead will look like, not just for the United States, but most notably for American assets, interests, and specifically American troops throughout that region in countries like Iraq, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, where American troops are stationed right now. Not necessarily in the form of retaliation from Iran itself, but certainly there is a real significant concern about the potential, which the U.S. officials tell us is preparing for, of retaliation by Iranian proxies. Again, we do expect to hear from the president, Jose, in just a matter of minutes from now. We are told he will be speaking from the Cross Hall, not the traditional Oval Office address, as we hear from him tonight. Back to you.
Peter Alexander, so thank you so very much. We're going to take a quick pause, and we're going to be joining the NBC network shortly. But the Prime Minister of Israel calling tonight a pivot of history. Be right back.
The idea that
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Jose Diaz-Balart.
Good evening. We are coming on the air with breaking news from the White House. Any moment now, President Trump is set to address the nation after he said the United States bombed multiple nuclear sites inside Iran earlier this evening. This attack is historic, marking the first time the U.S. has ever conducted a direct military attack on Iran and escalating the conflict between Iran and Israel. Take a look at the map. You see those 3 points there, right in the center of the country almost? Those were the 3 sites the United States attacked. The President of the United States telling our own Kristen Welker that the attack was extremely successful. A complete and total success is how President Trump told our Kristen Welker. According to multiple White House officials, NBC News has also learned that the president set to say that he is not planning any additional strikes on Iran. But I want to show you those words that the president has just released about an hour plus ago. But Kristen Welker spoke to the president. I want to go right to Kristen Welker, the moderator of Meet the Press. Kristen, what did he have to tell you?
Jose, as you said, President Trump clearly emboldened in the wake of these strikes, hailing them as a complete success, a total success, and a great success. So that, I think, will be the tone that we can anticipate hearing from President Trump when he addresses the nation just moments from now. This is a turning point for President Trump, who campaigned on an America First foreign policy going back to 2016, 2020, 2024, arguing that he wanted to keep America out of foreign entanglements. This is a step toward ensnaring the United States in the Middle East conflict. President Trump had said that he was going to give diplomacy with Iran a chance. For months, the Trump administration had been talking to Iran, the president saying he would give them an additional 2 weeks, clearly coming to this conclusion after deciding that wouldn't work, Jose.
And Kristen, here's the president.
Very much. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
President of the United States wrapping up his words right now. We're back with our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, one of the very striking sentences that the president said tonight, there will be peace or there will be tragedy for Iran.
That's right, Jose. He said there will be peace or there will be tragedy that is far greater for Iran. I was struck by a couple of things he said here, and I was told in advance by multiple White House officials that the president was hoping these strikes and would communicate his hope that these strikes would help prompt Iran to come back to the negotiating table. The president said if there is not peace here forward, that future attacks would be far greater and, as he described it, a lot easier. But let's pull back the curtain for a little bit. The president only a matter of days ago said he would take up to 2 weeks to make a decision about whether or not the U.S. would intervene in Israel's war with Iran. Clearly, the president either had his mind made up when he made that announcement or made it up very quickly. It did certainly give him, in the eyes of some national security experts, a bit of breathing room where perhaps Iran had backed off any expectation that a strike of this kind would take place. So the president, we have now heard, with B-2 bombers that only the United States has, and with 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs, again, bombs that only the United States has, in his words, totally obliterated the nuclear sites, 3 of them across Iran. Specifically, he said the objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear capability. He describes today's effort as a spectacular success. Jose, I've had an opportunity to speak to others who were in this cabinet room, I should say the Situation Room, with President Trump here at the White House as he was monitoring what took place tonight. The Attorney General Pam Bondi among those of whom were in the room, part of his national security team. She, in a text message, tells me this is a, quote, great day for our world's safety. But as we speak about this day, which is certainly historic, the real question now is about what we should expect in the days ahead. And the real concern, certainly in the eyes of those here at the White House and across the American national security community, is what retaliation is coming next from Iran. Certainly nobody expects Iran to slip away into the night quietly here. And the expectation is, even if Iran is not to retaliate, that certainly its proxies would be inclined to do so, with a series of potential targets across that region, including U.S. interests and assets like American bases there, and beyond that, American troops, tens of thousands who serve throughout that region. Jose?
Peter Alexander, thank you very much. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. He is in Tel Aviv. Richard, you that so well know the region, the words that President Trump utilized tonight, backed up by what he called an extremely successful military mission in Iran, and then the words by the Prime Minister of Israel just moments before the President of the United States, there's a very consistent, strong message to the rest of the world.
It seems like Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump coordinated their messages. They were both effectively saying the same thing. Shortly before President Trump spoke, Prime Minister Netanyahu released a statement in English talking about this operation, confirming that it had taken place. And he thanked President Trump profusely, mentioning President Trump's name repeatedly from the start, in the middle, at the end of the speech, saying that the United States has done something historic. And Prime Minister Netanyahu, like President Trump just did, was framing this operation as one designed to bring more peace in the Middle East. Prime Minister Netanyahu said there is peace through strength, but strength comes first, and then comes the peace. And you were just talking a short while ago with Peter Alexander, and President Trump has framed this as he was describing, that hoping that these attacks would convince Iran to, quote, come back to the negotiating table. Iran is at the negotiating table. Iran has always been at the negotiating table. Iran's foreign minister just did an interview with our Andrea Mitchell, talking about the need to negotiate and how Iranians feel that they have been manipulated in this negotiation process, that it has been a bait and switch, that they have tried to negotiate, and the more they engage in the negotiations, the more they find themselves under attack and caught off guard. So does this lead to more negotiations? From Iran's perspective, the negotiations have only lured them into a trap, but what choice do they have at this stage? Do they go all out and risk their end of their regime, or do they try and enter into some kind of humiliating, from their point of view, agreement? So very difficult decisions coming out of Iran. So far, we've been hearing messages of defiance. On Iranian state TV, their main message has been that this attack was not as successful as President Trump is framing it, saying that the materials were moved out. They didn't specify exactly what, but that the materials had already been evacuated from those 3 sites that President Trump said were just obliterated by American military power.
And I want to bring in NBC News Pentagon correspondent Courtney Kube. Courtney, what are the steps going forward for the United States to be able to determine how effectively they did indeed obliterate these 3 sites, as the president claims?
Yeah, that was something I was really struck by. The term completely and totally obliterated is how President Trump characterized all 3 of those sites. Now, first off, the U.S. is going to have to wait until daylight in Iran, which is coming up pretty soon, to be able just to see. I'm sure that there will be satellite images. I'm sure that there will be, frankly, social media images that will pop up to show exactly what have happened there. But the reality is the best way for anyone to determine exactly what the real battle damage assessment is to have people on the ground. Jose, I cannot envision any scenario in which that involve U.S. military or U.S. personnel in any real way. But I suspect that's what they would really need to have a real, complete, confident assessment that, in fact, the facilities have all been completely and totally obliterated.
And the Pentagon has been for some time now sending many resources, both the ones that we can see and the ones that we probably can't, to the region. What are some of those sources and resources going to play a part of in protecting U.S. assets and interests in the region?
Yeah, so we've already seen some of them play out, and I suspect that they are only on an even higher heightened state of alert. I don't know how they can go any higher than they have been, frankly. But the U.S. has moved in ground-based interceptors in recent months. That's THAAD and Patriots that have been used, frankly, to help Israel defend itself against some of these Iranian attacks over the last recent days. But the U.S. has also moved in additional ships. Some of those have ballistic missile defenses. They have the ability to shoot down an incoming ballistic missile or other projectiles that are coming at, whether it's U.S. installations, at the ships themselves, or even at land, something like if in fact Iran is trying to target Israel here. But the U.S. also has brought in additional air assets, so jets. They can put those up, they can shoot down drones, missiles, whatever it is that's coming at them. Jose, the big question is any concern about attacks from some of these smaller groups. So we're not talking about necessarily just ballistic missiles flying from Iran. A lot of that capability has actually been taken out in recent days. The bigger concern right now is these proxy networks that are there in the region. They aren't always firing off large-scale missiles and things. They attack bases with rockets, with mortars, but they can be very deadly in their efforts. And if they try to overwhelm some of these bases and these base defenses, that could pose a real problem for U.S. personnel in the region. That is something that we need to be watching. I would really be fixed on the bases in Iraq and Syria, because there are a number of these proxy networks there. They've been essentially lying kind of dormant in recent months, but they have shown in recent years the ability to really threaten U.S. bases and even cause injury and death to U.S. personnel and service members in the region, Jose.
These are very delicate moments. Courtney Kube, thank you so very much. I want to bring in the moderator of Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, who spoke with the president just a short time ago, right before he spoke to the nation. Kristen, what did he tell you, and what have officials on Capitol Hill been saying?
Well, President Trump was extremely emboldened. He called this a great success, a complete and total success. And you heard him really reiterate that in his address to the nation, Jose. And as we watch and wait to see what Iran's next steps will be, I do think the debate on Capitol Hill will be the next place where we will be looking. Already, you have some Democrats and Republicans saying that Congress should have signed off on this first. Senator Tim Kaine, for example, Massey has come out, a Republican from Kentucky, and said that Congress needs to sign off on military action first. Having said that, a number of Republicans and even some Democrats are praising the president's actions tonight, saying this was targeted, this was necessary to stop Iran and its nuclear program. That's where this debate is going to go. What, if any, congressional oversight should there be? Remember, Congress did vote on the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, and so undoubtedly I think you will start to see some of those arguments come to the forefront as we watch and wait to see what happens next. And I've been talking to lawmakers on Capitol Hill. There is a general sense, Jose, those who are supportive, those who are concerned about this actions, what will happen next? What, if anything, will the retaliation from Iran look like? And then what might that mean for the United States? President Trump earlier this week was pressed on whether this could ever involve U.S. boots on the ground. He indicated no, that was not something that he would be willing to green light. But again, if this situation continues to escalate, Jose, the real concern is, could this ensnare the United States more deeply into a foreign conflict? And of course, what's so extraordinary hanging over all of this is a president who campaigned on a promise to get Americans out of foreign wars. This very conflict has really divided the MAGA base. Steve Bannon, one of his closest allies, urging the president not to take this action, concerned that it could be another Iraq, which of course ensnared the United States for over a decade, costing thousands of American lives. And so the debate on Capitol Hill, the debate within the president's base will continue, I think, to unfold as we continue to watch and wait and see what happens next, Jose.
And of course, all of this explained and debated and spoken at Meet the Press, only on NBC tomorrow, Sunday. Thank you, Kristen Welker. I want to bring in our senior Washington correspondent and the anchor of NBC Nightly News Sunday, Hallie Jackson. She is with us on the phone. Hallie, we're speaking with Kristen about the repercussions and the concerns on Capitol Hill and really throughout the country here as to what happened so far away, but the concerns that maybe that will have an impact on us here. What are you hearing?
Yeah, politically and domestically, Jose. So a couple of things here to the point that you and Kristen and others are discussing here, and this question over authorization and the president's ability to initiate a strike, an airstrike like the one that we have seen tonight in Iran. So remember, back when he struck and essentially took out Soleimani, which you heard the president reference in his remarks just in the last couple of minutes, his administration suggested that they were basing that on Article 2 of the Constitution. You've heard the discussion around the War Powers Act. You've heard discussion, including from a couple of Republicans, I would say a small minority of Republicans, about the constitutionality of a strike like this. This is a president who has previously leaned on other authorizations. The authorization for the use of military force had come up back during that strike, although the administration did not heavily rely on that at the time. So I imagine when you have Speaker Mike Johnson, for example, late tonight suggesting that the United States was in quote-unquote imminent danger, that is where this is heading as it relates to the authorization question. The other piece of this, of course, domestically and politically, is the American response. And by that, I mean voters. We've already seen polling in recent days as this conflict has intensified between Israel and Iran, suggesting that more Americans disapprove of the U.S. getting involved in the Middle East, getting involved in a region that has ensnared the U.S. previously for many years in largely unpopular or wars that became unpopular, conflicts that became unpopular. So I think when you see the president talk about this being essentially a targeted strike, that perhaps speaks to the appetite of the American public of getting involved in something like this. At the same time, you also heard the president pledge to strike again, if need be, if in fact there wasn't peace, as he put it. He suggested there would be that quote-unquote greater tragedy that could, in fact, unfold here. Remember, Iran has already suggested that if something like what happened tonight were to happen, they would retaliate against U.S. bases in the region. Courtney, others have spoken about the military capabilities of Iran to do something like that. But I think that retaliation question, Jose, is another one that we have to watch in the days to come, especially as the world is laser focused on this particular moment tonight, Jose.
You are watching continuing live coverage of a major breaking news event tonight here on Channel 1 America. We thank you for joining us. This is continuing coverage of where the United States has struck Iran tonight, struck 3 of their major nuclear facilities. Iran has already made a claim that what Trump is saying, the United States obliterating the Iran nuclear facilities, is an absolute, I guess in his words, fake news, because they claim that they have moved anything that was in those facilities. But according to the president and according to officials close to the situation, these facilities have been completely destroyed. We are going to continue our live coverage from NBC News in a moment, but we also want to let you know that here at home in New York City tonight, police there have surrounded some religious facilities, in particular the Jewish ones, out of an abundance of caution. ABC News is reporting in the event something were to happen from Iran. You know, Iran has terror proxies in the region, and some of them may already be here. We just simply don't know that. But they are definitely watching, and you could say the United States is on a heightened state of alert tonight as a result of this mission. But we do know that B-52s were sent there this evening over to Iran, and they have returned out of Iranian airspace successfully and safely. Now let's go back to NBC News. Stay with us all night for continuing coverage from our war room right here, the command center here in Atlanta, and also a variety of sources from around the world. We're going to keep you abreast of the very latest and continue to get worldwide reaction of this major breaking news event. Again, if you're just joining us, the United States has hit Iran. 3 nuclear facilities were hit Saturday evening, our time, 3:45 in the morning, Iran time.
There would be oversight. There would be international verification of what Iran was doing. But Iran was allowed to have enrichment for domestic energy, civilian energy purposes. And I think kind of the Trump calculus here in these early months of his presidency was, we just can't trust Iran at all. We can't trust them to have even a proclaimed civilian nuclear capacity. We believe that they are in possession of enough uranium to build several bombs worth if they were to further enrich that uranium. Maybe there's additional information that they have worked more on the weaponization aspect of the nuclear weapons program. Again, that remains to be seen. The public has not been presented with such information, though there have been some press reports. And we do know that Iran has been working on and perfecting its ballistic missile programs, because they've been firing several hundred of those at Israel, both last April, last October, and again this month. And so I think the president basically decided, look, if we've got one shot, let's not waste the crisis. Let's go big. And it appears that that's what he's done tonight.
And Jeremy, just you with your deep experience and understanding, as you are a student of this, as well as a participant over the years in so many aspects of it. But since 1979, the Iranian regime has been very clearly opposed to Israel and considers the United States the great Satan, the big enemy. And as early as 1979, when we had 444 days of 60 Americans and supporters taken in the American embassy in Iran for 444 days. And then 1983, the Beirut barracks explosion that killed 241 of Marines, patriots. There has been a pattern in the Iranian regime as of 1979 to be willing to have talks ad nauseum, but very little results. Why you think, Jeremy, it was the president's decision to act now?
Well, I think several factors kind of conspired to present this narrow window of opportunity for the president to ask. But the main one is that Iran decided to join the post-October 7th war against Israel. So after Hamas invaded Israel on October 7th, 2023, and of course there have been links between Iran and Hamas, but then on October 8th, something happened, which was that Iran, which is a sponsor of Hezbollah, the terrorist army operating out of Lebanon, Hezbollah joined the fight, attacking Israel's north. And so Iran effectively joined the fight directly against Israel. And then after Israel attacked some Iranian Quds Force commanders operating out of Syria in April of 2024, Iran fired ballistic missiles directly at Israel. And that kind of crossed a big red line. Israel responded. There was a back and forth. Then Iran again in October 1st of 2024, attacked Israel with ballistic missiles. And Israel's response there was very important, and I think historians will note it. October 24th, 2024, Israel took out Iran's ballistic missiles, its ballistic missile production capabilities, but more importantly, its air defenses. And once Iran lost its air defenses and then had lost Hezbollah after Israel took out the Hezbollah leadership, and Iran's Iran's proxy or partner in the region, Syria, fell, the Bashar Assad regime fell, then essentially you had a very weakened Iran that had no terrorist military that could take on Israel. And Israel had kind of a clear shot, clear skies, clear flying lanes over Syria to go right after Iran, and Iran had no air defenses. And so the United States is looking at this situation saying, hey, we've got Iran, as you pointed out, that has been our sworn adversary since 1979. They've attacked our forces. They attacked the Marine barracks in the 80s. They've attacked our forces all around the Gulf. There are Houthi elements. Their Houthi proxies have attacked U.S. naval ships. They're the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. They're building a nuclear facility, a capability. They say not to build a nuclear weapon, but they also have part of their enrichment facility buried deep underground in a bunker. It's too small for any civilian use. And I think Trump is looking and saying they've got no air defenses. Their ballistic missile situation is totally compromised. This is the time, if ever there were one, to basically put a gun to the head of the Iranian regime and say, if you don't give up domestic enrichment, we're going to shoot. And I think that's exactly what happened. Trump said to them, this is what I demand. The Iranian regime said, no, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in giving up domestic enrichment of uranium. And Trump saw the way the first week and one day have been going for Israel in this war, where Israel has had total air dominance and has personnel on the ground and has been taking out Iranian Quds Force and military leaders. And you know, Israel's basically been operating with impunity in Iran. And I think the United States, under President Trump, said, you know, we should act now because this may be our last best chance to get at Fordo, get at Natanz, get at Esfahan, and have minimal impact to U.S. forces. Of course, that's kind of the day one calculus. I think what analysts have been talking about all evening, and we're going to be talking about for the next several weeks and months, is what next? What happens now? Will Iran attack U.S. forces in the region? Will Iran unleash terrorism? Will Iran bury its nuclear program deeper underground, make it harder to get at? Will they kind of lick their chops, take their time, and go back, and will we be here 2, 3, 4 years from now with Iran having a much more capable nuclear capacity? That's really hard to know, and it's going to require vigilance by the international community, by the United States, by our key allies and partners to make sure that Iran does not kind of move out of this phase and develop the nuclear weapon that we so desperately don't want them to have.
Jeremy Bash, thank you so very much. I want to go to our back to our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. Peter, many concerns, many questions tonight out of the White House, and we were seeing these pictures from the Situation Room where the president, along with the Secretary of Defense and the Joint Chief of Staff, as well as the foreign minister, I should say, but it's really the Secretary of State of the United States. In the moments previous to and during this mission, what more can we expect out of the White House?
Well, we do know what's going to be interesting is that President Trump is scheduled to leave early next week for NATO, where he will come face-to-face with some of America's European allies. So this will obviously be at the top of that conversation. It comes just days after the president abruptly departed halfway through his visit with many other allies when he was in Canada as part of the G7 that was taking place there, the group of 7 leaders that were gathering together there. I'd want to give you some updates. We heard from the president moments ago. We are now hearing some of the reaction to the president's words, and among the concerns, obviously, right now for all Americans, certainly for this administration, is the potential for some form of retaliation. Moments ago, we just heard from Kristi Noem, of course, the Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security. She said, "We will work unceasingly to protect the American homeland." She writes, "Thank you, President Trump." Separately, we are hearing from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a leading Democrat right now, who is reacting strongly to the president's comments and saying, in effect, that his strikes today amount to grounds for impeachment. Let me read in part what we're hearing from her in the form of a statement saying the president's, in her words, disastrous decision to bomb Iran without authorization is a grave violation of the Constitution. And she says the congressional war powers. He has, in her words, impulsively risked launching a war that may ensnare us for generations. She adds, it is absolutely and clearly grounds for impeachment. And then finally, separately, we are hearing from the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, who writes in part, "Thank you, Donald Trump." And he adds, "Today, President Trump proved that never again is not just a slogan, it is a policy." Obviously, the idea of never again following the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews lost their lives, many across the Jewish community worldwide, and certainly in Israel, viewed Iran. Bibi Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has communicated this many times, that the Iranians' desire was to annihilate the Jewish state there, in effect, a repeat of the Holocaust. So that's the view as we are hearing from the Israelis. We will get more information specifically about what happened, perhaps a bit more of the TikTok as they can share it from the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is going to be speaking tomorrow morning alongside the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who joined the president, as we saw when he delivered those remarks earlier inside the residence here at the White House.
Peter Alexander at the White House, thank you so very much. And it's just a little bit past 10:30.
And it is just after 10:30 on the East Coast on a Saturday evening. And this is David Dutton from the War Room at Channel 1 America, continuing coverage where apparently the United States has entered the war, at least for this night, in Iran, where the United States bombed Iran earlier. It was during literally the middle of the night, Iranian time, about 3:45 a.m. there, Sunday morning, that the United States carried out airstrikes against 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities there. And according to Trump and officials close to the situation at the White House, those 3 sites were totally obliterated, completely destroyed, and our troops returned, at least out of Iranian airspace, very safely, and the mission was completed. We understand that the New York Police Department tonight is on high alert and adding security to religious facilities around the city there. One of note is the Jewish synagogues and churches there as a result of this incident that occurred tonight. Iran has already made a statement since this attack from the United States happened, saying that the facilities there were not completely destroyed. And as a matter of fact, we have moved any material that were in those facilities out. So, and they have also threatened before this would happen that basically would attack the United States. But there's also, we have U.S. service members, as was mentioned earlier. Let's go back to the president now, when he made his address earlier, in case you're just joining us.
I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
The President of the United States just about 30 minutes ago. I want to bring back Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker. Kristen, you're now going to be speaking to the Vice President tomorrow?
Jose, that's right. We do have an interview with Vice President J.D. Vance on Meet the Press tomorrow morning, and there are a number of questions clearly at the forefront in the wake of this monumental announcement and action by President Trump. What comes next? Of course, the world is bracing as Iran has warned for a counterattack. What will that look like? And then what will the United States response be to that? And then the big question for the administration as it relates to what we're hearing here in Washington, what's the reaction to lawmakers who are saying that President Trump needed congressional approval in order to take this step? You just heard my colleague Peter Alexander reading that tweet from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We have seen a number of other tweets that echo that throughout the night. Representative Tom Massey, a Republican of Kentucky, saying this is not constitutional. The ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, Jim Himes, saying, according to the Constitution, we are both sworn to defend. My attention to this matter comes before bombs fall, full stop. That is the sort of debate that will be unfolding on Capitol Hill. The counterpoint to that you are hearing from other Republicans and some Democrats is that this was a targeted strike. They will argue that Iran was too close to being able to develop a nuclear weapon, and therefore that justified this action. But then the question becomes, what is the specific intelligence that backs that up? Remember, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, testified before Congress in March that Iran was not moving toward developing a nuclear weapon. So did that intelligence change? Will the administration share those findings with Congress and with the American public? That looms very large over this. And again, you heard President Trump say that he is hoping that what will come next is Iran coming back to the negotiating table. But what will happen if we don't see that occur? Could this further ensnare the United States in a foreign war? Remember, President Trump ran on an America First foreign policy. This has really divided his base, which says this is counter to that. So we'll be watching for that debate as well, Jose.
Kristen Welker, thank you so very much. I want to bring back Richard Engel in Tel Aviv at this hour. Richard, we saw the President of the United States speak, and just moments before the President of the United States spoke, just over 30 minutes ago, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had a recorded message in English applauding the President of the United States.
He certainly did. The expectation was that we were going to hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu after President Trump spoke, but this recorded statement was released just shortly before he did, and it was a thank you. President Trump's name was mentioned repeatedly. I didn't count, but it may have been a half a dozen times or more that Prime Minister Netanyahu mentioned President Trump's name in this very brief statement, thanking him for his resolve, thanking him for America's military might. And the key takeaway line, perhaps, was that how Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump talk about peace through strength, but that strength comes first and peace after that. We will see if this opens the door for peace or it just opens the door for a more protracted conflict, another open-ended conflict here in the Middle East. Israel is clearly concerned about a military retaliation. The Home Front Command has issued new guidance to the people of Israel, telling them to be more cautious, putting this country on a form of lockdown. So no schools, no work gatherings, no large public events, no entertainment. All of that has been suspended. Only essential work only, according to this new guidance.
Richard, I'm just going to ask you to dig into the vast pool of knowledge that you have and experience in the region, and specifically, of course, with Iran. The President of the United States saying there will be now peace or tragedy for Iran. That regime that has been in power since 1979 and that has seen the infrastructure of that regime be so deteriorated, especially in these last 7 to 8 days by Israel. What are they looking at? What do you think their options are, both private and public?
So this is a long battle that has gone on between the United States and Iran, Israel and Iran, that is now broken out into the open. It has now become a conventional war. But there was a war in the shadows. There is this animosity going back right to the foundation of Iran. When the Iranian Islamic Republic took over, the theocracy took over in 1979, and took over in part by taking American diplomats hostage at the embassy in Tehran. The two nations, America and Iran, began, or the new Iran after the Shah was overthrown, began as enemies, began as bitter enemies. And we're seeing some of that revenge, some of that sentiment still playing out right now. This well of animosity now coming to the surface. President Trump in his remarks talked about all the limbs that Iranian car bombs and roadside bombs caused. He's referring specifically to Iraq. When the United States invaded Iraq, became entangled in that country's civil war, unleashed that country's civil war, Iran intervened. Iran intervened so that it would have influence over Iraq. Iran started attacking American soldiers so that American soldiers would leave Iraq and not try and have regime change across the border in Iran. And many Americans were killed and injured by Iranian roadside bombs in Iraq after the U.S. intervened. So there was a lot of history, a lot of military action that has taken place covertly or on let's say, on a foreign field of battle. But now you have the U.S. intervening directly, attacking Iran directly, which is something it has not done since the hostages were taken, since Jimmy Carter tried to rescue those hostages and had a failed rescue attempt. This is a very different U.S. military response to Operation Eagle Claw that was launched to try and rescue the hostages, and which ultimately changed the course of American politics, probably cost the president the election.
and those hostages that weren't released for 444 days, released in January when President Ronald Reagan was swearing in Washington, D.C. I'm just wondering, Richard, there are so few strong proxies left for Iran in the region, in no small part because of Israel's deterioration of Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. The United States has had a campaign against the Houthis recently. What are the other players that have been supporting Iran? And I'm thinking specifically Russia and China, not forgetting that Russia has been getting many of its drones, its armed drones, from Iran for its invasion in Ukraine.
So on a state level, Jose, probably no one is going to intervene to help Iran tonight. They don't have a NATO. They don't have those kind of alliances. Russia, Vladimir Putin, is very happy to buy drones, depends on Iranian drones, has been using them to great effectiveness in Ukraine. China buys a lot of cheap oil from Iran and likes the fact that it has effectively cornered the Iranian market because so much of Iranian oil is sanctioned. The Iranian market is largely focused on sending its fuel to China because it has no other choice. It can't operate internationally in an open way. But those military and economic relationships are not profound enough that Russia or China are going to intervene militarily directly anyway. There have been reports that China or Russia could supply Iran with some weapons, but it seems unlikely that either one of them would risk a direct conflict over Iran. The regional powers, very unlikely. They have generally taken a position against Iran, particularly the Arab states. We're talking about Iran's ability to project power itself, and it still has some military capacity, although clearly less each day as Israel is carrying out these strikes, and now the U.S. is involved. And its militias are not what they used to be. Prime Minister Netanyahu has long wanted to do this operation. He wanted to do it after 9/11. He wanted to do it and each time there was a new president that he interacted with. He has been pushing this agenda. Time has come to attack Iran. He's given speeches in front of the UN. You can go back and see many, many times when Prime Minister Netanyahu has made the case that the world must intervene and must attack Iran and that the U.S. must get involved. He differed from the Mossad. He did with the Israeli intelligence agency, which at some stage said it wasn't necessary, it was too risky. He's been pushing this agenda for a long time and now had the ability to do it. He had a friend in President Trump who agreed, and Iran's proxies have already been effectively eliminated by several wars that Israel has launched since October 7th, coming up on 2 years this October.
No action possible. Words, of course. We're seeing some words already of support for Iran by its allies in this part of the world, and I'm thinking Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, that have been a strong supporter of Iran because Iran has been a strong supporter of those three dictatorships going back years. Richard Engel, thank you very much. We just got a new Truth Social post from President Trump, and I want to read it to you as you see it on your screen right there. It says, any retaliation by Iran against the United States of America will be met with force far greater than was witnessed tonight. For more, let's bring in our NBC News Pentagon correspondent, Courtney Kube. Courtney, this is a very clear statement by the president that he expects no retaliation against the United States by the Iranian regime.
Yeah, candidly, Jose, I thought that would be a message that the president would have really hammered home in his statement less than an hour ago now. So it's interesting that only moments after he finished speaking from the White House, he put out a statement saying this. This is clearly an indication that there is this ongoing concern that Iran or Iranian proxy groups or networks are going to retaliate against the United States. And there are so many assets that are already there forward in the region. There's U.S. military. There's also diplomatic assets. But the U.S. military and the defense officials who I'm speaking with are particularly concerned about those bases there. The U.S. has moved additional personnel into the region in recent months. Now, a lot of that is defensive in nature, right? They've put additional ground-based interceptors in. There's more ships in the area. There's now 2 carrier strike groups in the CENTCOM area. Destroyers have moved in closer to Israel in recent days. That is for the defense of Israel, but they can also serve to defend Americans and American assets in the region. In addition to that, the U.S. has brought in additional aircraft and fighter jets in recent days and weeks, and that is also so that they can shoot down incoming projectiles. Remember, the U.S. Air Force was pivotal when in one of these now numerous back and forth between Iran and Israel since October 7th, when the U.S. Air Force was up in the air shooting down multiple projectiles, a lot of drones that were coming from Iran launched towards Israel. Now, I suspect that message from President Trump is as much aimed at big Iran as it is at these proxy groups. There's a lot of concern about some of the smaller bases and where the U.S. has, a small number of troops in in Iraq and in Syria. They aren't as heavily fortified, and with so many of those proxy networks that really have freedom of movement and maneuver space around them, that is one of the big concerns. Now, Jose, I can also tell you we're learning a little bit more detail about what the U.S. did in Iran tonight. We know that those 3 strikes were, those 3 sites were targeted, but we now know that a big part of that targeting effort was actually conducted by the United States Navy. U.S. submarines launched off about 30 Tomahawk missiles known as TLAMs. Those are launched from the submarines. They impacted at least 2 of those sites at Isfahan and at Natanz, Jose. Again, the president saying that these strikes completely and totally obliterated the sites, but we'll have to wait and see when daylight hits exactly how much damage was done there.
Courtney Kube, thank you so very much. I want to go back to our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. The president, Peter, said that some of his representatives were going to be speaking to the press as early as tomorrow.
That's right, Jose. We're told that we're going to hear from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Dan Kane will be speaking as well at about 8 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow morning, where we might get a bit more specifics about what took place. But I think what's important to note is what Courtney just reported here on NBC, that the U.S., beyond those B-2 stealth bombers dropping those 30,000-pound bombs, a specific number that we still have not been able to identify. We know it was multiple bombs that were dropped. We now know that there were at least 30 Tomahawk missiles that were also fired from U.S. Navy vessels, apparently by submarines there. So to the point that we've been having throughout the course of this hour since the president spoke, when given a wide range of options, and it was communicated to me and our colleagues over the course of the last several days that all options remained on the table. Clearly, among the options, one would have been to exclusively focus on Fordo, which of course is that deep bunker of a nuclear enrichment site beneath a mountain there in the center of Iran, but that the president, as evidenced by the use of Tomahawk missiles beyond the B-2 bombers, has decided to go further than that, to focus on 3 separate nuclear targets here, delivering what they hope will be, in his words, a totally and completely obliterating blow to the nuclear program there. I should note that in my conversations here with multiple White House officials just before the president spoke, they told me that the president currently has no plans for additional strikes, but that now leaves open the question, as he has communicated in the form of that post a short time ago and in his remarks earlier, that if they do not see any movement toward peace going forward, if there is future retaliation, that the U.S. will go after Iran again, they said, with precision, speed, and skill. And he says this time it will be much easier, something they'll be able to do in just minutes, because so many of the defenses there in Iran have been defeated, knocked out by the Israeli Air Force over the course of the last several weeks. Again, I think of course, tonight is historic, it is significant and is monumental, and now the infighting will exist on both sides of the political aisle about whether this was constitutional and their views of it. Republicans and Democrats are largely divided there. But ultimately, I think the real way that the legacy will exist for this president is not just the decision to do this, but what the immediate days that follow and perhaps weeks and months that follow look like, and what form does the retaliation take? Is the U.S. Does this lead to peace, or does it lead to a protracted conflict? All things the president, through our conversations with national security officials and White House officials over the course of this week, had communicated to him by those advisors as they spoke to him over the week. In effect, he was told, as it was described to me, the pros and the cons, what the potential fallout would be of each potential scenario. And so now we have seen what the president has decided. Now we wait to see what Iran decides to do in response.
Peter Alexander at the White House, thank you so very much. I want to bring in retired U.S. Army General Barry McCaffrey, NBC News military analyst. General, looking at this strictly from a military perspective, this was, to use the president's words, extremely successful.
Yeah, I think this was a bold and largely decisive attack to change the nuclear development equation inside Iran. Iran is greatly weakened, not just from the ongoing Israeli air attack on facilities throughout the country, but they're isolated, they have no allies, their proxies have been largely destroyed or neutralized. I think it may well be an incentive to negotiate, certainly not tomorrow, but in the coming months. The only drawback to it that's obvious, it's a political disaster probably for the Trump administration, largely not supported by the American people, by the Democratic Party, by his own party. And I think it also tends to gloss over what the Iranians are going to do in the next 72 hours. It's hard for me to imagine there won't be a military response. Hopefully ineffectual, but you always got to worry about the golden BB striking a U.S. Navy warship at sea, catastrophic losses, in which case I think it will unleash the power of the U.S. Air Force and naval air and Tomahawk missiles on the Iranian nation.
That would be essentially, the reaction would be then essentially a de facto decapitation of the Iranian regime. General, the things have changed so much for Iran after the 7th of October, and you and I have had these conversations, boy, for years now about the effectivity of the Israeli armed forces and its security and intelligence divisions when it's destroying much of Hezbollah with the walkie-talkies and the pagers to what they've done in Gaza, and they continue to do in Gaza. General, how much of that has permitted the United States to conclude this operation?
Well, I think the impact of intelligence in general, the U.S., of course, has a remarkable overhead systems, electronic intercept, a human capability. The Israelis have a lot of native language speakers inside Iran. So the degree of penetration of the Iranian military and government is simply unbelievable. We also understood that they had mapped out pretty well with captured documents from a few years ago the state of development of the whole nuclear program. And I might add, although it's impossible to end the Iranian nuclear program, you can delay it by a year, a decade. And so my assumption is that's what's happened. We may have to strike it again. But the big question in my mind, Jose, is in the next 72 hours, how does Iran respond? They're weakened. We have 50,000 troops in the area. There are 2 carrier battle groups there now. A third has been told to deploy to the region. There's a lot of Air Force power in Saudi Arabia, the Gulf Coast states, Italy, the UK. Essentially, we're de facto at war with Iran for now.
General Barry McCaffrey, always a pleasure to speak with you. I thank you very much. Really appreciate it. That concludes this NBC News special report. Once again, recapping the President of the United States announcing just over an hour ago that the United States had successfully attacked and, according to the President, completely obliterated these 3 nuclear sites inside Iran. And one of those 3 sites has been a deep under a mountain site that has been extremely hardened with concrete and steel. According to our sources, the United States used those bunker-busting bombs and possibly even the planes, the B-2s that are needed to transport those bombs. They had never been used. We're seeing that that is the ordnance that was utilized in this one attack out of 3. The other ones were hit with Tomahawk missiles, more than 30 of them. That concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more breaking coverage right now on our streaming network, NBC News Now, and online at NBCnews.com. I'm Jose Diaz-Balart. Thank you for the privilege of your time.
Which Donald Trump hopes and wants, he said in his address, to be the only action they take. But they have urged Iran to now agree to an end to this war and to seek peace going forward. Our coverage will continue at the top of the hour. This is Sky News. It's 4 o'clock. Our breaking story this morning. After days of uncertainty, US President Donald Trump orders strikes on 3 nuclear sites inside Iran.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
The US Air Force deploys its B-2 bombers to drop 6 bunker-buster bombs on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Inside the Situation Room, the White House releases images from last night's national security meeting. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister says the decision to target the 3 nuclear sites will change history. Now, the world looks towards the White House and the Middle East to see what could happen next in the conflict. Good morning. And we begin with breaking news. After days of uncertainty, the United States have completed 3 strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. President Trump said the bunker buster bombs completely obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. In an address to the nation, he argued the action was showing peace through strength.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Well, the U.S. Air Force targeted 3 key locations in Iran's nuclear program. They include Isfahan, the location of a significant research base, Natanz, and Fordow. Details about the damage caused by the strikes is not yet known. But as we just heard there, Donald Trump says the 3 sites have been obliterated. Well, despite President Trump's claims, we've had the first reaction to come out of Iranian state media in which the effectiveness of the attacks are being downplayed. Here, a man is speaking about the Fordow enrichment plant.
The news confirmation is coming in that apparently only 2 tunnels, the exit and the entrance, have been damaged. And the President of the United States has bluffed again, claiming that they have destroyed Fordow and have caused serious damage to other nuclear sites.
Well, our US correspondent Mark Stone had the latest from Washington as he spoke to my colleague Yalda Hakim.
It was at 7:50 in the evening here in Washington that a social media post on Donald Trump's Truth Social account dropped. That was the first moment that we discovered that he had indeed authorized an operation. He said, "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran." He said a full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. And over the course of the subsequent hours, we got more detail on what had been hit. The 3 main nuclear sites had been hit. A total of 6 massive bunker-busting bombs were dropped on these sites, on the main site at Fordow, and Tomahawk missiles on the other 2 sites that you can see there. We then had detail of from the speech, from the address to the nation itself, an address where he claimed that these 3 sites had been completely and totally obliterated. Now they must make peace, he said. He sought as well to reassure the American people and to justify his decision tonight to the American people who remember a significant number of the people who voted for him were very against him taking any action in this faraway war, as they would see it. He has decided to defy them, and part of his statement tonight in the White House was an attempt to justify that, to remind them just how involved in malign activities Iran has been over so many decades and has resulted in the death of so many American service people across the Middle East. So a justification there, and then a message as well to the Iranians. He pointed out that the operation that took place this evening in Iran was the most complicated, the most difficult operation that they could have carried out. Anything that comes after this, he said, will be much, much easier. That was a warning to the Supreme Leader.
From the War Room, this is continuing coverage of the conflict in the Middle East. I'm David Dutton from the War Room in Atlanta on Channel 1 America. This is continuing coverage tonight as the United States bombs Iran, bombs 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran has already made a statement saying that those facilities were not destroyed, as Trump says, and also any material in those facilities have already been moved. But according to the president and officials close to the situation tonight at the White House, is all those facilities were completely obliterated. They were conducted by B-2 stealth bombers, officials tell Network News. And the president had a news conference live, you've seen here on our air, Channel 1 America, earlier tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, discussing the situation that happened at 3:45 a.m. Iranian time, early Sunday morning, during the middle of the night. We believe what they call buster bombs, the bombs that go through a mountain. These facilities were apparently in and up under a mountain, inside of a mountain. These buster bombs went in, they penetrate the surface and go all the way down to where the facilities actually are, inside of these mountains, and they were completely destroyed from within. The president is asking for peace now from Iran. Iran had said previously that they were going to continue making nuclear weapons and possessing nuclear materials. We are going to continue to follow this still developing story all night long. We invite you to like, share, and subscribe this live stream channel of breaking news and severe weather for Atlanta, America, and the world. When something major happens, we are here to cover it for you live. Whether if it's a tornado in the plains or major breaking news from around the world, we're here to cover it for you live here on Channel 1 America. Let's go back to Sky News right now for the very latest on what's happening up to the minute.
Allow for another couple of weeks of diplomacy. He changed his mind, and we saw the result of that this evening.
Mark Stone there. Well, reacting to the strikes, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked President Trump. Here's what he had to say in a post on X.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
Earlier, my colleague Yalda Hakim spoke to our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle in Jerusalem.
Interesting that it was the Americans who first announced this news, and announced it after their aircraft were out of Iranian airspace. So the Iranians will be gathering themselves and starting to want to try and retake control of the situation, at least internally, and I'm sure we'll see some pretty dramatic messaging coming from them in the coming hours. And just as much, and you've been discussing this with Mark, just as much as Donald Trump has had different voices in his ear, some urging strikes, some saying don't get involved. So too the Supreme Leader will have differing opinions within his own regime about what to do next. I suspect that the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, will be more eager to strike back and strike back hard. But there will be other voices in the Iranian regime, within the Iranian leadership structure, saying, let's not, let's preserve the authority and the life of the regime, and let's not get into a war with the United States. I think it's interesting that the targets that the Americans hit were military targets. We knew they were coming. I know we can say that now in hindsight, but people were tracking these bombers making their way from Whitman Base in Missouri, for many, many hours now. And the Iranians would have done similarly. So it sounds like they might have evacuated those sites, if not in the last few hours, but over the last few days. So perhaps that reduces any casualties there might have been. Donald Trump, don't forget, boasted that he knew where the Supreme Leader was. Ali Khamenei was hiding. Well, they haven't tried to take him out. They haven't tried to go after individuals, personnel. The Israelis have, but the Americans haven't done that. They have limited this to the nuclear sites. And I guess the hope will be, from an American point of view, and from others, is that therefore limits the response. And as I was saying earlier, in terms of what Iran's response has been to Israel, it has now been over 24 hours since we had the last missile attacks on Israel from Iran. That is the longest period since Israel first carried out the strikes against Iran just over a week ago.
Yeah, and just some updates on that point. Reuters is reporting now that the Israeli military says that under tightening safety restrictions, schools and workplaces will be closed with exceptions for essential sectors. So they are clearly anticipating some kind of response from the Iranians, which we've seen over the course of the last week. Israel has been launching strikes freely over Iranian airspace, and we have seen the Iranian regime launching ballistic missiles over the skies of Israel, people rushing under to their shelters. And now this alert from the Israeli military saying under tightened safety restrictions, schools and workplaces will be closed with exceptions for essential sectors. Donald Trump has been, in the last few minutes, also been speaking with Axios in a phone call, and he's quoted as saying, "We had a great success tonight. Your Israel is much safer now." And so that's Trump speaking to Barak Ravid of Axios in a phone call, saying, "We had a great success tonight. Your Israel is much safer now." I guess, Ali, the big question is whether this spreads out to the rest of the region, how Iran responds to this, because clearly Israel is expecting and anticipating some strikes here.
But, those words, "your Israel is much safer now," does suggest to me that Donald Trump's mindset right now is that, okay, enough. We have come in, Israel has been bombing Iran for 8 days. They have taken out hundreds of targets. America has now come in, and I think from Donald Trump's point of view, sort of finished the job for now. So that seems to be where Donald Trump's head is at. He is not the only person who has a say in the matter here. It is the Iranians. I think Donald Trump will have some control over what the Israelis do next. So I think that if there is not a major response by Iran, or at least if there is a controllable retaliation by Iran, then I think Donald Trump might say to the Israelis, okay, I've done what you've asked me to do. It's time for you to stop now and to de-escalate the situation, perhaps in hope of further talks. But it is entirely dependent on what the Iranians do next, and whether they widen it or whether they limit their retaliation to something that's a bit more symbolic.
You are watching Sky News. Do stay with us. Coming up, the US strikes nuclear facilities in Iran. We assess and analyse what action Tehran could take in response. Welcome back. Well, these strikes by the US on Iran pushed the Middle East into uncharted territory. Iraq finds itself in a unique position. Sat on the border with Iran, it must now attempt to maintain good relations with both Iran and the United States simultaneously. Earlier, our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey spoke to Yalda from Erbil.
We just saw 3 Chinooks take off from the American air base, which is a few miles away behind me. That doesn't mean anything, of course. We've seen them in the skies, and we often do. Definitely, there is a concern here that the Shia militias, who are incredibly powerful, who are angry and have been threatening action against American potential targets here for some time now, if America was to get involved, that they will just simply ignore any orders from Baghdad and will carry out attacks themselves. And of course, it's possible that Iran itself could launch missile strikes here as well. There's a number of potential targets. There's obviously the embassy in Baghdad, which we are told is now effectively emptied. We can't absolutely confirm that, but our sources are good. But there is this concern that this will develop. I think it was interesting, wasn't it, that Mark pointed it out, that the president was talking about the numbers of American servicemen who have been injured. And, of course, that took place in Iraq, but it was the technology for the shaped weapons that were used that blew up American military vehicles. It changed the dynamic here, and it took lots of limbs and lots of lives. And, of course, that information, how it was done and how they were organised, the various militias here, came from Iran itself. And that was, I think, what the president was trying to remind the people of the United States. The key thing is, though, has it been as successful as he says it is? As Mark pointed out, totally obliterated is how he's described the nuclear program in these attacks that have taken place. We will have to see how much, what damage has been caused. We don't know how we're going to see that. We're going to have to wait to see. I think Mark was suggesting it could be special operations from the Israelis might give us those pictures. I suspect if they're on the ground, well, we know they're on the ground, that they will do at some point. And then, of course, there's the satellite imagery, which will come out as well. But it's not just, obviously, in Iraq, but there's other areas of the Gulf as well that have potential targets for Iran if they try to take the next step and escalate this further. What the president is clearly saying to them is just don't do it. We've done one huge mission, but we can do an awful lot more. And the Israelis, of course, and I think the United States have been quite surprised at how successful Israel has been in its various attacks on Iran over the last week or so, that they will obviously be able to keep operating as well. So, I mean, you have to see what happens next. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but it is actually a fact. And it's light here now, and we'll probably start to see things as they develop throughout the day, and there will be more statements. At the moment, what we've heard from Iran is them playing down the effects of this attack. The president says it's totally obliterated. Iranian state television has said that actually it was relatively minor. That may be a choreographed reaction, which obviously the president is wanting, is that Iran just accepts that things aren't going awfully well for them, and maybe it's best that they come to the table and talk. Of course, if it is as successful as he says, then the issue about their ability to produce nuclear weapons may no longer be an issue. I find that hard to believe, but we don't really know. And in fact, nobody really knew what these weapons were going to be like when they actually were deployed for the first time, I believe, ever. In anger, and what exactly they've achieved. That's going to be the key thing, because really, if they have actually completely destroyed it, then it becomes a whole different discussion about the way forward for Iran. And obviously, we've heard from the Israeli Prime Minister already saying that this is about to bring in a new era, as he said, of peace in the Middle East. While what's going on in Gaza continues, of course, that era is not going to change. The number of countries who would potentially, like Saudi Arabia, grow relations with Israel, they're going to find it very difficult to do so while Gaza continues, and there's nothing to indicate that that's ending soon. But if you take the Iran issue, maybe the Americans have been successful in that mission, though history does tell us that peace doesn't usually come about from one side destroying the other necessarily, so that it all comes to a nice conclusion, that it just rumbles on and grows and gets worse later on. But I suppose we'll just wait to see what the Iranian reaction is to what has happened overnight.
Our Stuart Ramsey there. OK, time now for a pause and a look at the weather.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Fresher air is moving in from the west, triggering a few sharp showers and bringing an end to the heat wave. By early Sunday morning, Saturday's thunderstorms will have cleared, but further heavy downpours will move into parts of Ireland and Western Britain. It will be largely dry elsewhere. Brisk westerly winds will spread scattered showers through further east through the day, but there will be plenty of sunny spells in between. For most, it will be a fresher feeling day, although southeast England will remain hot and humid after another muggy night. Those showers will be heaviest and most frequent in the north and west, with just a few showers getting further south and east. By Monday, everywhere will feel much cooler, with temperatures back to average. There will be plenty of sunny spells, with showers mainly affecting Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England. Thicker cloud and outbreaks of rain will move into the southwest later. And overnight rain will clear on Tuesday to leave a cloudy start, followed by sunny spells and scattered showers.
Breathtaking views with clear skies ahead. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Still to come here on Sky News. After days of uncertainty, the US strikes Iranian nuclear facilities. We'll have President Trump's full address to the nation next. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, our top story. After days of uncertainty, the United States has completed 3 strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. President Trump has said the bunker buster bombs completely obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. In an address to the nation, he argued the action was showing peace through strength.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel. And God bless America. Thank you very much.
While the U.S. Air Force targeted 3 key locations in Iran's nuclear program. They include Isfahan, the location of a significant research base, Natanz and Fordow. Details about the damage caused by the strikes is not yet known, but as we've just heard, Donald Trump says those 3 sites have been obliterated.
I think we're witnessing a historic decision by President Trump. Every American president since Bill Clinton has pledged to the American people and our allies that Iran will never be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. But President Trump is the only one who authorized military strikes to prevent that. And this is a very consequential decision. It will reshape America's regional posture. It will reset our deterrence equation in the region. And I think that it has very significant implications for how the U.S. is viewed in the world as well.
One of the things that Donald Trump said in his statement is that now is the time for peace. He's hoping that this will be the moment where, this back and forth, the tit-for-tat attacks that we've been seeing between Israel and Iran, for that to end and for, all sides to sort of end this becoming some kind of prolonged war of attrition. But is there concern that this could spill out into a greater conflict in the region?
Well, there are always risks when the U.S. undertakes military action. There's also risks with endless diplomacy. And President Trump lost patience with the diplomatic process as the Iranians did not take his offers seriously. They consistently rejected them. They stalled, and they were using delay tactics. And it's not just President Trump who the Iranians have repudiated diplomatically. They also repudiated President Biden diplomatically in his offers to revive the JCPOA. So this strike was a long time coming, and the Iranians badly miscalculated. They knew the United States has the capability to destroy its nuclear program, but they've always doubted that the U.S. had the will to do so. If you listen closely to Iranian officials over the years, they have always doubted that the military option was real. But President Trump tonight demonstrated that it was real, and it happened, and that's very important.
Throughout the course of the last week since Israel launched its strikes on Iran, we have been hearing from the Israelis that they have struck Natanz, for example, and Isfahan at a different time. We heard that they had done that. Talk us through why Fordow was so significant and why it needed American intervention.
Fordow was very significant because it was buried in a mountain, and the United States developed a bomb, the massive ordnance penetrator, to pierce that mountain and destroy the nuclear facility. And so that is why Fordow was highly significant for the U.S. to strike, because Israel did not necessarily have the same capabilities that the United States had to do so, like the massive ordnance penetrator and the B-2 as the delivery vehicle for that bomb. So that is why it's significant, and the Fordow nuclear facility was one that was untouched amid Israel's campaign around Iran militarily that had started a few days ago. Israel had taken strikes at Natanz and Isfahan. It looks like the United States had also taken strikes at Natanz and Isfahan to clean up and make sure that Israel fully destroyed the program in those sites. And the United States also, of course, destroyed the Fordow nuclear facility tonight with a bomb.
Jason, could it be plausible, and this is, these are things that have been discussed here in Israel in the conversations I've been having, is that many of the materials could have been already moved from these sites?
Well, I think Iranian officials had threatened that that was going to be the case. I think that the U.S. and Israel likely have very good intelligence on the ground, and I think Israel has proven that over the last week as to where these materials are. And so I think that that was part of the strike package in ensuring those materials were destroyed alongside the sites that President Trump announced in his post.
And Jason, is there a possibility? I mean, we've seen in the last week scientists taken out, and these now nuclear facilities have also been taken out. That doesn't prevent Iran from, trying over the course of the next few years to resurrect its program.
Right. The Iranians calculated that they could survive a strike by the United States on its nuclear program. They have preferred a strike as opposed to agreeing to zero enrichment in Iran, which was President Trump's red line. And so I have no doubt the Iranians will try to rebuild their nuclear program in some way. They will also try to rebuild their missile and drone program, which has been badly damaged by Israel's strikes as well. The Iranians play a very long game, and they have a lot of patience, but this is an unprecedented amount of devastation that they have suffered in just a week. And so this is going to take time. It's not only going to take time, it's going to take money. And let's not forget that Iran is under punishing American sanctions, and it's going to deprive and starve the regime of the resources that are necessary to fully rebuild these programs. So Iran is in a very big hole right now.
That was Jason Brodsky there speaking to my colleague Yalda Hakim a little earlier. And Yalda also spoke to former U.S. diplomat Alan Eyre, who said he was doubtful that these strikes by the U.S. on Iran will significantly weaken the country's nuclear program.
Suffice it to say, I'm unpleasantly surprised by these events. I was hoping that this administration would not do that. I don't think that this strike will in any way, well, at least permanently end Iran's nuclear program. They'd already moved much of the relevant material out of their nuclear sites. I don't think this will lead for the Iranians to sue for peace. So it's now in the Iranians' hands. The Iranian leadership that existed about 10 days ago would have been relatively prudent and not rush to attack U.S. forces. I think that's still the case. I think an immediate widespread attack on U.S. forces in the region is unlikely, but I think the probability of a wider escalation and continuation of this war is greater now than it was a few hours ago.
And Alan, no doubt the conversations that the president would have asked questions about the day after. And part of that calculation would have been, I guess, even though this is the roll of the dice, that he wouldn't want to see this prolonged into a bigger conflict that would drag the United States in. Are you saying that you're concerned that the day after now looks like a more destabilized region?
I don't think there was significant, or at least significant talk about the day after, at least with the requisite expertise. I think that whatever form of Iranian government survives, whether it's this one or a more nationalist, a more militarized one, or whether this regime in fact stays in power, they're not necessarily more likely to give up their nuclear program. So if President Trump thinks this will cause the Iranians to sue for peace and give up their nuclear energy program, I don't see that happening. But again, there's just so much that's unknown. President Trump obviously is seeing intelligence that I don't, and so decided to roll the dice. The question now is, does Israel stop bombing? I mean, I saw some Israeli sources saying they consider the nuclear program eliminated, but what's nuclear's war goal? What is Israel trying to get out of this? They're not just trying to end Israel's nuclear program, they're also trying to, as they've admitted, destabilize the current Iranian government.
I just want to unpack some of the things you've said. So, first of all, the idea that, and that has been floating around in the last few days, with the Iranians themselves saying that they would be moving some of the material out of these sites. Just talk us through that in terms of, you know, these sites have been hit, especially Fordow was in these sites of the United States and Israel. But you believe that material, the essential material that was needed has already been moved to other places?
I think it's highly likely. I think that Iran's nuclear program the hardware is geographically dispersed, and it's impossible to eliminate it to the extent that it can't be reconstituted if there is a political will by the Iranian government to do so. Obviously, we can talk about greater or lesser amounts of time it would take to reconstitute that, but the key variable here is, will Israeli and U.S. military action be such that it causes the people running Iran to renounce the nuclear program? And I don't think we're there yet. And I don't think you can get there kinetically by bombing Iran.
And Alan, you have dealt with the Iranians. You're privy to the JCPOA, the nuclear deal that President Obama struck. Just talk us through, the interactions then, and was there a sense that they were willing then versus where they are now?
Certainly, back then they were willing to cap the amount they enriched, the type of centrifuges they had, the level to which they enriched uranium, and also to accept vastly greater verification measures and vastly greater transparency into their nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of sanctions. So when we were doing this, neither side got all they wanted. As President Obama said, he would have preferred to not have one centrifuge spinning. But back then we got a deal that was good enough, and the key variables back then were we were able to drastically limit the efficiency, the scope, the activities of Iran's nuclear program, and also vastly increase our ability to look into it. And I think it's likely now, though it's too soon to tell, that we're going to lose, obviously, that ability, that transparency, our ability to look into Iran's nuclear program on the day after.
You also mentioned there that perhaps Israel is not just looking at the elimination of Iran's nuclear program, but also has openly talked about regime change at different points and destabilizing the regime. But do you feel that that is also not plausible?
I mean, there's no perhaps. The Israeli Minister of Defense said we're looking to eliminate the nuclear program, eliminate their missile production capabilities, and eliminate the axis of terrorism, their axis of terrorism, and also destabilize the Iranian regime and drive people out of Tehran. There's no indication yet on that last goal, destabilizing the government, that they've been successful. According even to Israeli press, I was reading something recently in the Jerusalem Times. So far, the Israeli intelligence is indicating that the current Iranian regime is still firmly in control of all its organs of power. Obviously, it's taken a great hit kinetically. But if the Israeli government is trying to topple this regime and replace it with a more user-friendly government to the West and to Israel, there's no indications that we're starting to see that yet. There's been a significant rally around the flag effect by the Iranian people. And at least anecdotally, I hear that whereas before there was a lot of pro-Israeli sentiment in Iran, at least more so than in the neighboring Arab countries, there certainly is far less of that now.
Well, one of the biggest questions now is how Iran will respond and what the scale of that response will be. The initial reaction from Iranian media suggests there may still be escalation to come in this conflict. In a striking message, the presenter on Iran's state media channel, Mehr news agency, claimed every U.S. citizen had now become a target.
We were negotiating with the Americans when we were attacked. You made this choice. You started this. The 40 to 50,000 American soldiers in the region are now legitimate targets. Every American citizen and soldier is a legitimate target. We were negotiating, we were using diplomacy, but now you've chosen for the blood of your soldiers to be spilt. The American president in the White House chose to collect the coffins of 40 to 50,000 American soldiers. We will start this, and we will show not only your military presence or military bases in the region, even the presidency of Trump will not be in existence anymore.
You are watching Sky News. Coming up,
And you just heard that from Iranian TV saying that every U.S. citizen and soldier is now a target. The President Trump's presidency is will be no more, and told U.S. officials to plan for 40 to 50,000 coffins, as they're apparently are going to, as they said, U.S. citizens and soldiers are now a target. Matter of fact, it said every U.S. citizen and soldier there and over here are now a target. That's the very latest from Iranian television early Sunday. You're watching continuing coverage from the War Room on Channel 1 America.
Lightning strikes and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. Free wherever you get your news. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in.
Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous.
We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, our top story this morning. After days of uncertainty, the United States has completed 3 strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. In an address to the nation, President Trump said the bunker buster bombs completely obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. But what does this action likely mean for Iran's nuclear program? Well, joining me now is Sean Rostker, a research analyst at the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. He joins me now live. Hello to you, Sean. Thank you for joining us here on Sky News. First of all, your reaction to the targets in particular, those 3 nuclear sites that the US targeted.
Well, thank you for having me. I'd say the choice of targets, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, it sends a clear message, but it doesn't fundamentally change the nuclear risk involved here. These sites are significant, yes, but Iran's program is designed to be resilient. The strikes may have very well set things back temporarily, but they don't eliminate Iran's capacity to rebuild. And in fact, they may only serve to harden Iran's resolve to, in fact, accelerate its program in the wake of this attack. So while the targets are certainly technically important, the strategic effect is much more uncertain at this time.
Yeah, there's been some, obviously the United States are saying this is a massive success. Donald Trump really hailing the spectacular military success, as he called it in his address, but Iranian state TV really downplaying the impact of this American action there in their country. Do you think they had the time to remove the materials, get the people out so that actually, even though the bunkers themselves may be hit, the resources are not?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It's entirely plausible that Iran, had some advance warning or some contingency planning in place. These are hardened sites, after all, and Iran has long anticipated the possibility of such military action. So it's possible that they relocated some nuclear material or personnel beforehand. But again, if they didn't, I think the bigger point here is that enrichment capability isn't solely about hardware. It's about knowledge, it's about infrastructure and intent. And those aren't things you can destroy with a missile strike. So Iran downplaying the damage may be partly strategic, but either way, their ability to recover is very real.
And Sean, in the run-up to this conflict and indeed to America's action now, there were some conflicting reports on how close Iran actually is to acquiring a nuclear weapon. What's your understanding and your assessment of that? How dangerous was that moment and how close were Iran to actually having the capability to launch a nuclear missile?
I mean, it's an extremely dangerous moment indeed, but not because Iran was necessarily on the brink of a bomb, but because perception right now is driving action. And yes, there were conflicting assessments in the lead up, but no clear evidence that Iran was imminently weaponizing. And I think that's an important point to make. The IAEA hasn't verified, key parts of the program for some years now, but that's not the same as saying a weapon was days away. Acting on worst case assumptions without full clarity, this risks locking us into an escalatory spiral. And now that diplomacy has been supplanted by military strikes, the danger is really that Iran might race for the bomb. And it's that we've lost the tools at this point to know for sure.
Do you think there's a way back from this then? You say that it definitely feels to you that diplomacy is not on the cards at the moment. Do you think there is a way back from that, from this moment now?
Well, it's going to be very difficult, but certainly not impossible. The trust that underpins diplomacy has certainly been badly damaged by these strikes. But I will say, if both sides recognize that the alternative is a wider conflict and unchecked nuclear risk, there may still be a path back. And that wouldn't necessarily require a serious recommitment to negotiations. You could possibly see through third-party mediation, some sort of standing commitment to get back to the negotiating table. But there will have to be clear political will to rebuild what's been lost here at the diplomacy table.
Sean Roske, I'm afraid we are out of time, but thank you for joining us here on Sky News for your assessment on our developing story this morning. Thank you. Now let's see how the weather is looking.
The perfect climate, wherever the destination. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Fresher air is moving in from the west, triggering a few sharp showers and bringing an end to the heat wave. By early Sunday morning, Saturday's thunderstorms will have cleared, but further heavy downpours will move into parts of Ireland and Western Britain. It will be largely dry elsewhere. Brisk westerly winds will spread scattered showers through further east through the day, but there will be plenty of sunny spells in between. For most, it will be a fresher feeling day, although southeast England will remain hot and humid.
The perfect climate, whatever the forecast. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
This is Sky News. It's 5 o'clock. Our breaking story this morning. After days of uncertainty, US President Donald Trump orders strikes on 3 nuclear sites inside Iran.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
The US Air Force deploys its B-2 bombers to drop 6 bunker-buster bombs on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Inside the Situation Room, the White House releases images of last night's national security meeting. Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister says the decision to target the 3 nuclear sites will change history.
His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity.
Now the world looks towards the White House and the Middle East to see what could happen next in the conflict. Hello, good morning. We begin with breaking news. And after days of uncertainty, the United States have completed 3 strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. President Trump said the bunker-buster bombs completely obliterated Iran's nuclear sites. In an address to the nation, he argued the action was showing peace through strength.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God. I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East, God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
So the US Air Force targeted 3 key locations in Iran's nuclear program. They include Isfahan, the location of a significant research base, Natanz and Fordow. Details about the damage caused by the strikes is not yet known. But as we've just heard, Donald Trump says those 3 sites have been obliterated. One of the biggest questions now is how Iran will respond and what the scale of that response will be. The initial reaction from Iranian media suggests there may still be escalation to come in this conflict. In a striking message, the presenter on Iran's state media channel, Mehr News Agency, claimed every US citizen had now become a target.
We were negotiating with the Americans when we were attacked. You made this choice. You started this. The 40 to 50,000 American soldiers in the region are now legitimate targets. Every American citizen and soldier is a legitimate target. We were negotiating, we were using diplomacy, but now you've chosen for the blood of your soldiers to be spilt. The American president in the White House chose to collect the coffins of 40 to 50,000 American soldiers. We will start this, and we will show not only your military presence or military bases in the region, even the presidency of Trump will not be in existence anymore.
Our US correspondent, Mark Stone, had the latest from Washington as he spoke to my colleague, Yalda Hakim.
It was at 7:50 in the evening here in Washington that a social media post on Donald Trump's Truth Social account dropped. That was the first moment that we discovered that he had indeed authorized an operation. He said, "We have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran." He said a full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. And over the course of the subsequent hours, we got more detail on what had been hit. The 3 main nuclear sites had been hit. A total of 6 massive bunker-busting bombs were dropped on these sites, on the main site at Fordow, and Tomahawk missiles on the other 2 sites that you can see there. We then had detail of from the speech, from the address to the nation itself, an address where he claimed that these 3 sites had been completely and totally obliterated. Now they must make peace, he said. He sought as well to reassure the American people and to justify his decision tonight to the American people who remember a significant number of the people who voted for him were very against him taking any action in this faraway war, as they would see it. He has decided to defy them, and part of his statement tonight in the White House was an attempt to justify that, to remind them just how involved in malign activities Iran has been over so many decades and has resulted in the death of so many American service people across the Middle East. So a justification there, and then a message as well to the Iranians. He pointed out that the operation that took place this evening in Iran was the most complicated, the most difficult operation that they could have carried out. Anything that comes after this, he said, will be much, much easier. That was a warning to the supreme leader, a warning to the Iranian government. Now, he says, after the strength comes the peace, in his view, and he is demanding that the Iranian leadership now fall into line his hope is that a line is drawn under this and that nothing more happens. But as we've been discussing, a massive, massive gamble for the president. Will Iran retaliate? And if it does, how successful will that retaliation be?
Mark, we heard from the president, but there's also some images coming out of the Situation Room.
Just one image, a still photograph, which was, we're told, was taken during the Situation Room briefing a few hours ago while these attacks were ongoing. I think we can put it on the screen. You can see it. It is an image. Oh, we've got more than one. I've only seen one of them. So there is the the president in the Situation Room, which is in the West Wing, just yards from the Oval Office. He came back to Washington late this afternoon. That was a planned trip back. He'd spent the day at his golf course in New Jersey, but we knew he was coming back to the White House for a briefing in the Situation Room at 6 p.m. This evening. But at that stage, of course, we did not know that that would be a briefing at which he would have already authorized the strikes and he would watch them unfold. So there, the president on the left, in front of him in the yellow is Susie Wiles, his chief of staff. General Raisin Kane is there, the chair of the Joint Chiefs, the top general there, and I think behind him is the Vice President, J.D. Vance, who was alongside the president as he addressed the nation a short while ago. So images that will now be will form part of the first draft of history. As always, there is J.D. Vance alongside the president. That there, the image, I imagine the president, the face that the president wants to be portrayed with right around the world now. Peace through strength is what he says this is, an extraordinarily audacious, decisive strike, a strike which he says has completely and totally obliterated Iran's three main nuclear sites. We do not yet have clarity on just how successful, independent clarity on how successful those strikes have been. On one end of the scale, as you would expect, Iranian state television saying that the damage is minimal. Trump saying precisely the opposite. As the sun rises in Tehran, the satellite images will become available over the course of time, and they will give some clarity over just how successful this strike has been. An extraordinary night, and certainly from where we were 24 hours ago, where Donald Trump was saying he would allow for another couple of weeks of diplomacy. He changed his mind, and we saw the result of that this evening.
Well, reacting to the strikes, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked President Trump. Here's what he had to say in a post on X.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America. God bless Israel. And may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
Earlier, Yalda also spoke to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, in Jerusalem.
There is a warning from Donald Trump. The Americans, of course, will be expecting and will have priced in a form of Iranian retaliation. It is what form that comes in that will be key to how this moves forward. I think that the Iranians will feel compelled to respond. There will be different voices in the Supreme Leader's ear, some urging a major response. I think the Revolutionary Guard will want to hit back hard, others urging some caution. We'll see whether the Iranians take their time or whether they retaliate quickly. Retaliation in and of itself is not necessarily the strongest move for Iran. I think the analysis in the hours ahead will be that however successful the US strikes on the Iranian nuclear facilities have been, it's unlikely that they have entirely eliminated Iran's nuclear program. Iran has been developing a nuclear program for many, many, many years, and I don't think they will stop now. And it might be their ultimate calculation that they still have something left to develop, and rather than engaging a massive war, drawing in the Americans and perhaps threatening the survival of the Iranian regime, actually the strongest thing they can do is to some extent, take this hit, but retain some of their power in order to rebuild in the years ahead.
And Ali, Israel will be waking up to this news. The Iranians will be waking up to this news, and no doubt this region will be on edge. Already, the Israeli military has said all schools will be shut, and all non-essential work and movement needs to be kept at a minimum at this point in time.
Israelis will be waking up now to this news because they haven't been woken up overnight, either by preemptive alarms from the Home Command in anticipation of an Iranian attack, or because of sirens going off because there is an incoming ballistic missile attack. Pretty unusual. This will, well, I think we can now say, now it's first light, has been the first night in 8 days. There's been an unbroken night. Now, again, we shouldn't read too much into that. Iran, even by the IDF's estimation, still retain quite a considerable ballistic missile threat, and we would expect them to use it at some point over the coming hours. It's Sunday here, the first day of the working week, but again, it's going to be a very muted day as people stay at home, businesses remain shut, schools remain closed, and everybody waits to see what happens next.
You are watching Sky News. Stay with us. Coming up, the US strikes nuclear facilities in Iran. We assess and analyse what action Tehran could take in response.